What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Myth Vision Podcast. We're going to be talking about how Jesus lied, was wrong, mistaken, made predictions, and they did not happen. I'm Derek Lambert, the host of this channel, Myth Vision. Good to see everybody here. It looks like Jesus is in the chat already. I must apologize to you now, Jesus. I mean, you clearly did return. You just returned a little late. That's all. Good to see everybody here. Make sure you smash that like button. Share this bad boy out there. We're going to be covering a bunch of different material, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I've got some books I've been reading lately. For those who don't know, Delcy Allison Jr., he has his book, Jesus Interpreted, and of course, noted some interesting stuff there. He's got another book, if you haven't read it, The End of the Ages Has Come, of course, back then. When Prophecy Failed, this isn't about Jesus, but this actually covers some of the interesting Old Testament failed prophecies. And guess what they did? You'll be shocked. They kicked the can down the road. That's what happens when prophecy fails. When a prediction doesn't happen, a lot of different things take place. A lot of them, because humans do different things with them. And I've gone through literally the ringer as a Christian evangelical, gone through various forms of Christian fundamentalism. I mean, I went through like speaking in tongues, kind of charismatic Christianity. I moved into Calvary Chapel. I hear there's a bunch of scandals going on with Calvary Chapel now, getting crazy. I went to Baptist church. I mean, all sorts of different Baptist type churches. I eventually ended up in a PCA, Presbyterian Reformed church, that I hear now is no longer PCA. They reverted back to an older Scottish Rite kind of version that's more conservative, because I guess the PCA is doing all sorts of liberal stuff now and they're not into it. But anyway, I got in big trouble with that church because I started to take Jesus's words kind of serious, and was going to Bible studies with men, pointing stuff in my Bible. I wish I don't know why I didn't bring my Bible for this stream. But I'm like, dude, read that. Like, what is that saying? What does that sound like? And then I'd ask questions. I'd be like, they might be leading, but they're important to lead because you may not even think to look at them and be like, what's that sound like to you, man? And he's like, yeah, it sounds like he was talking to them. And I'm like, yeah, it does. That's what I'm saying. It sounds like Jesus, or whoever wrote this story, was saying Jesus was talking to them. And once you start doing that, the whole edifice crumbles. It falls apart. It becomes very problematic. So good to see everybody. Mother frickin' Windyberg in the house. What is up, X Music? Good to see you here. Danil, James, what's up, brother? Good to see you. We got Sky Daddy. Everybody talks about Sky Daddy doesn't exist. You're wrong, and you need to publicly apologize for that, because Sky Daddy clearly exists. What's up, Kyle? Going up to the tippy. This is interesting. I saw this before I went live. I'm not even going to comment on this yet. We might get to it, but of course, Jesus is here. Let's see. Mr. Morpheus in the house. Good to see my friend Morpheus here. He did return, his resurrection. Again, we need to get into the problems with this, right? Anything will go. When you want this stuff to work, you will make it work. Anything will become true if you try hard enough. And, someone might reverse that. The reverse Uno card. If you want it to be false, Derek, anything you can do to make it false. It's like, sure, they could throw that back. But when we look at it, you don't treat any other cult, any other claims that way. Let's keep it real, right? You just don't do it. Nobody's sitting here doing this for Sabotage Zevi in the Christian community. Nobody's doing this for Joseph Smith, unless they're a Mormon. No one is doing it but for their guy. And guess what? I got a funny little example. I was trying to spin it up on how I might word it for you who watch Myth Vision. Anyway, good to see you. The studio, the stud comic. Thanks for being a member, man. Really appreciate it. You're waiting, and listen, I did not fail to bring you the goods. Okay, unlike Jesus, I'm here, ladies and gentlemen. Alt Dimension. I'm just showing everybody some love before we get into some of this material here. Good to see you all. Hey, check it out. I got a goal I'm trying to achieve to keep doing this material, to keep doing live streams. If you have any questions, anything you want me to engage with, help keep the lights on, throw us some super chats, questions and stuff like that. They cut the line. You get front row seat. Of course, I put you on the shine here so everybody gets to see what you have to say. I don't care if it's positive, negative, or in between. If you're a critic or a friend, it doesn't matter to me. Anyway, I'm definitely looking forward to diving into some of this, because when I shared this on Facebook, there were already people asking questions, and there were many different kinds of questions that were coming up. So I really hope to dig into some of this. We may have time to review a video I have never made public yet that I just recently interviewed with none other than Del Allison Jr. to go into his latest book and ask him why he's thinking the way he thinks about certain things. So maybe we'll get there. Let's see. William Graves says, "You got it, Jesus lied. Why repent? Your torn-crowned king died for me sin." Deborah, good to see you, Deborah. Good to see you. Moshe says, "Derek, have you seen the Text Jesus app? It has an AI answer you. Pretty amusing. I'd be interested in your reaction to it. To be clear, my interest is academic, not religious." Awesome. Yeah, that's my approach. Clearly, as I'm pretty sure are well aware of, everybody. Lisa, good to see you here. And I just didn't want to leave everybody hanging. All right. Gives everybody some time to maybe pop in as we're getting this stream started. So let me give you an example. And I ran this through trying to see how to phrase this in a way that is contemporary, makes sense, but also makes sense for the viewer who might be tuning in, who's like, Jesus didn't lie. You're a liar. You're the liar. So I say, all right, let me show you exactly how this works. Imagine I look into this camera right now. Now I'm reading what I've put together here, but imagine I'm looking into this camera right now on this live stream. And I say with full confidence, truly I say unto you, every single person on the Epstein client list will be arrested, convicted, and sentenced for every crime they committed on that island. And it will happen before this stream is over tonight. The stream ends. Nobody got arrested. Nothing happened. The prediction failed. Clearly, obviously, plainly failed. Now watch what happens to my audience. They split usually into 3 groups. And this is the part you need to pay attention to, because this is exactly this is exactly what happened with Christianity, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot emphasize this enough. And we know that this is what happened based on textual data and heuristic comparisons to other cults throughout history. You can just look at how they behave, how humans act when they have apocalyptic expectations, and they fail. But let me continue. Group 1, the metaphorical interpreters. These are the fans who show up in my comments the next day and say, when Derek said they'd be convicted, he meant convicted in a court. He didn't mean convicted in a court. He meant convicted in their hearts. They feel guilt. They know what they did. The conviction is spiritual. Derek was right. You just have to understand what convicted really means. And someone else chimes in, when Derek said the island, he wasn't talking about a literal island. The island is a metaphor for the isolated moral landscape of the ruling class. And before you know it, they've rewritten my plain, simple prediction into some deep philosophical statement I never made. I said arrested. I said convicted. I said sentenced. They turned it into a poem, okay? That's kind of what N.T. Wright does. That's a lot of what full preterism does. If you don't know about these groups, they find a way to make it happen. at all costs, even if that means bending words to make it fit, okay? And this is what would happen with group 1. Group 2. The timeline extenders. These are the fans who say, Derek didn't say which stream. He said before the stream is over. And technically, Myth Vision is an ongoing stream of content. Duh. The stream isn't over. Derek is still streaming. So the prediction hasn't failed. It just hasn't been fulfilled yet. Give it time. It could happen next week, next year. The stream continues. And 10 years from now, these people are still in my comments saying, any day now. Derek said it would happen. The stream is not yet over. And someone writes a book called The Delayed Justice, Why Derek's Prophecy Still Stands. And someone else argues, well, to Derek, one stream is like 1,000 streams, and 1,000 streams are like one. Does this not sound familiar, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, now we have group 3. This is the rarest of all rarest groups. These, in my opinion, are the most gang humans on the planet, all right? I'm only speaking that way because I fit into this category, even though I was in probably both groups at one point in my Christian journey. I mean, I would say I was first in the second group where I thought a day is as 1,000 years. I'm still waiting for Jesus. Group 1 with the metaphorical interpretations, I ended up going to. This is group 3. This is, you are looking behind the curtain, okay? And now you're seeing it for what it is. That's group 3, okay? The smallest group. These are the people who say, Derek made a prediction. It didn't happen. He was wrong. I love the guy, but he was wrong. I'm not going to pretend arrested means something other than arrested. I'm not going to redefine tonight to mean sometime in the next 10,000 years. He made a clear claim with a clear timeline, and it failed, period. Now, this is the group that I think is trying to get to the facts at this point, and they're not still dealing with cognitive dissonance to rationalize their following of myth vision or Christianity, as the analogy I'm using is for Christianity. Now, here's my question for you tonight. Which group are you in when it comes to Jesus? Because Jesus looked at his disciples and said, some of you standing here will not taste death before the kingdom comes in power, if you read Mark, not saying in power if you read Luke, which is huge differences, but you really got to understand what in power even means. Paul told the Thessalonians, we who are alive will be caught up to meet the Lord. Obviously, he mentions caught up in the air to meet the Lord. Revelation says, I am coming soon. That was 2,000 years ago. Every one of those people, or those people are dead. Every one of them. Group 1 turned soon into a metaphor. Group 2 said this generation actually means some future generation. And group 3, the scholars, the historians, the honest readers said Jesus made a prediction and it failed. Every predictive cult in history follows this exact same pattern. When the prediction fails, most followers don't leave. They reinterpret. They extend the timeline. They find a way to make it work. And the small group that says it just didn't happen gets called faithless, gets called names, gets dismissed, gets called stupid, evil, you're going to hell, threats of fear, the whole nine. And just so you know, Christianity isn't unique. It's just the most successful version of this pattern that ever existed. The runner-up would be Islam. But we're not talking about Islam's failed prophecies tonight. That's a whole nother one. In fact, I've already scheduled a live stream to talk about some of the fiction, some of the stories that are made up in the Quran, specifically in Surah 18, that I'm going to cover in a live stream next Tuesday or Wednesday. I scheduled it earlier. But you got to get into the hadith. You got to get into what they were expecting at the time in the 7th century. Okay, let me come back to you. So if I missed any comments, any super chats or anything like that, please scream at me in the chat just in case. So I want you who are watching to understand there is a little more nuance to this, because the historians and the critical scholars will read the New Testament and they'll notice something. Much of the material and sayings of Jesus that are in the New Testament, depending on the scholar you read, they question whether Jesus said that at all. Much of that material looks like the author of that gospel invented this story, or someone else put that in the mouth of Jesus. So you get this struggle in the New Testament between obvious failed statements and statements that you could go, okay, I don't want my guy to fail. And there are places in the Old Testament where prophets have predictions that God says are dependent upon the behavior of Israel. So these things will happen as long as Israel repents, or as long as Israel does the right thing, then these things will happen. And when they don't happen, well, it's not a failed prophecy. It's just, Israel didn't do what God said that they were supposed to do in order for God to fulfill those things. That's why you should really check out books like When Prophecy Failed, Cognitive Dissonance in the Prophetic Traditions of the Old Testament. This book will cover some of that. But it's important you understand that scholars like Del C. Allison Jr., who is an academic who just so happens to be a Christian, okay, recognizes this problem. He sees it. So I was reading his book, and we might have to play some of this live stream clips and whatnot, or play it on the live stream so you can actually watch it. But on page 3 in his book, right, on interpreting Jesus, he calls it Tensions in the Tradition. Those of us who maintain that Jesus held an imminent eschatology must explain why some words attributed to him suggest or entail the passing of time between his end and the end of routine history. That is the end of expected history, the end of the world. Now, full preterist, I've been there, think the end of the world is never going to actually happen. They say you've totally misunderstood cosmos or oikumene, or the various terms in Greek that might signify world. And they say, no. There's no end of the world. End of the age was just symbolic of talking about the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 70 AD. Derek, you don't know what you're talking about. And if you might have known what you were talking about 10 years ago when I was a full preterist, you don't know it anymore. You don't know what you're talking about. So anyway, Allison continues. I think I'll go with a PhD here and someone who actually has been chewing on this for a long, long time and knows the full preterist arguments as well. He says, the words attributed to him suggest or entail the passing of time between his end, Jesus' death, and the end of routine history. Here are the most obvious examples. Mark 2:20, the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast in that day. Mark 13:3-27. This discourse in its entirety envisages a span of time between the speaker's present and his future appearance as the Son of Man. Mark 13:34-35. It is like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his servants in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeepers to be on the watch. Watch therefore, for you do not know when the master of the house will come. Mark 14:7, for you always have the poor with you, but me you do not always have. He goes through several others, and he gets into Matthew and Luke as well. Like in Matthew and Luke, he says, you will not see me from now on until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And then, of course, the Luke passage in Luke 17:22, the days are coming when you will long to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you will not see it. Luke 19:11, Jesus deploys the parable of the pounds, 19:12-27, because he was near to Jerusalem and because they, the disciples, supposed the kingdom of God was to appear immediately. The parable counters their false belief. Then you have the Gospel of John. You even have like 1 Corinthians and stuff like that. Well, he goes through some scholarship I gotta show you guys some of this stuff. I might as well just show you some of this material. That might be better, actually. So let me see if I can't pop up Dale C. Allison's book here, Interpreting Jesus. Let's see, which page is this specifically? It might be worth you seeing. It's page 5 on this one. You got to buy the book. Clearly, I don't want to get in trouble like sharing the books like this on the internet for free or anything like that, in case the publisher might get mad. Where are we at? Okay, early Jewish Christian text. Some of the scholars, rabbinic evidence. Oh, there it is. So he goes through these. I always butcher these names because they're like, I don't know if they're French or whatnot, but I always butcher names like this. I am the worst at it. But before that, he went through the examples here that I was just reading from, which are, these, and of course the earlier page, the tensions. And then he goes through scholarship. Then he goes through rabbinic literature that talks about some of these tensions, and he's making this case. I really enjoy Allison because he even has like spots where he'll say like, if I'm right about this, then cool. But if I'm not, everything I'm about to say is wrong. And he's like totally cool with being wrong about this stuff. And he deals with this like conditional position that a lot of apologists today you're going to hear online, like contingency in the Jewish Bible, the contingency arguments for Jesus, as if like once enough people repent in the world, then he'll come back, or other ways of trying to deal with that expectation that was saying it's going to happen soon. Contingency in the synoptic tradition he goes through. And I actually, let me make sure I have this highlighted properly here. I have it in, so you got the temptations. Like here's an example of Allison on page, if you get the book, 127. All 4 canonical gospels have Jesus, through miraculous means, feed a large crowd in a deserted locale. One may, with David Friedrich Strauss, deem the story to be wholly mythical. I tend to be with him on this, with David Friedrich Strauss. If that is the right view, then what I'm about to suggest is off target. Love the honesty. But this isn't about the apocalyptic stuff. I don't know why I saw the highlight. I'm like a squirrel. You got to get this book because he goes through all of these different issues. And in my interview, which we might end up getting to here shortly, I actually engage with him on his book and point out like, hey, hold on. So are you saying there's going to be like this extended period of time where the failure isn't actually clear, that Jesus expected the end to happen soon? And he's like, no, actually, I just at some point think Jesus, and we'll probably hear this, like changed his mind. Kind of how John Dominic Crossan does this a little bit, except he doesn't do it like John Dominic Crossan does. For those of you who are scholastic, those who read the academics. And he ultimately does think that Jesus thought it was going to happen soon, whether it was going to be months or a year or a couple years at max. He doesn't even think it's going to be a couple years. Dr. Allison does. But he did think that it wasn't going to happen like before he died, at the end of his life. He thinks he changed his mind. Now, we can all change our mind. We can all change our minds. But you're dealing with a guy that the Christians have literally deified. I mean, this is God in the flesh, right? And they could just turn to, well, not even the Son of Man knows the day or the hour. So like in his human form, his omniscience is absent. He cannot know things. He can get things wrong. And to me, it sounds like, again, the 3 groups I described on the Epstein Island at the beginning of the show, or dealing with like people becoming convicted and tried and all of that before the end of this stream. There's some excuses being made, I think, for Jesus. Maybe he changed his mind at the end of his life. Maybe not. I don't know the answer to this question, but I don't think Christians can get to it. I just don't think that's possible. Yeah, hit the like button, fam. Hit the like button. Let me see something here. Hold on. Make sure you guys super chat me to keep this thing going. I really, really do hope you guys will send some supers. It helps us keep doing what we're doing here. What mega bloodbaths in the house. Taco, what's up, man? I sent you a good argument on Jesus' resurrection on Discord. You did? Okay. Let me see what this, where is this at? Let's see. Where'd you send it at? I don't see it. I don't see it, bro. Yeah. So anyway, I'll try to keep an eye out on it. But yeah, if you have any questions, any comments, anything you want to super chat, I'll share it on the screen and we could discuss some of that stuff. I wanted to go through some of the passages specifically and go over an article that was sent to me by Steve, not Steve, but John Collins. John Collins wrote it on Mark 13, and he takes N.T. Wright, spins him over, spanks him, okay? He spanks him. Because what ends up happening, ladies and gentlemen, is when you get in Mark, you're going to get a lot of people who are going to say, well, that's metaphorical language. That's symbolic. That's apocalyptic metaphorical language when it comes to the sun, the moon, and the stars and all of that. And N.T. Wright takes this to even mean the Son of Man is metaphorical. Because if you go into Daniel, he thinks that Daniel's talking about the Son of Man being the people of Israel. Whereas John Collins, who's like the hermeneutic commentary writer of Daniel, this guy knows the stuff, points out that no, you can't get away with that. And he argues that in depth. Okay, hold on. You wrote me, aliens are more likely than God. I was just getting you to read the super chat plug. LOL. Where's the super? Oh, nobody super chatted yet. Mega Bloodbath says, I was just saying aliens are more likely to have resurrected Jesus than God. I mean, I think so. I think that life's evolved elsewhere. And so maybe life has advanced beyond us at this point. I don't know. I do not know. But it wouldn't shock me if there's life elsewhere. What I'm skeptical of is that they're messing with us right now. That's what I'm skeptical of. But again, I would still think you're correct about this. Oh, we got a super chat up in the house. Apollos. Good to see you, man. It's been a while. Thank you for the super chat, bro. Appreciate that. You say, hey, bro, what do you think of the Galilean crisis? The predictions were hopes, aspirations, but he submitted his will to the Father. See Dr. Ferda. Let me see if I can't copy this or somehow get this. I don't know about this argument from Dr. Ferda, but I'll run this through and just see if I can't get AI to like help me at least ascertain something of what Ferda makes an argument about here. Let me just see what about this comment. Let's see what my AI tells me pertaining to this argument and how it relates to what I've actually written, which is in line with Bart Ehrman, which is in line with Delcy Allison Jr. I mean, this is in line with most of, I think, the critical New Testament scholars pertaining to this. So, okay. So mind you, my AI is geared toward critiquing apologetics. Just so we're on the same page, this is my cards up front to what you wrote, Apollos. By the way, before I even respond to what AI even says about this, because I don't know about Dr. Ferda's work, I saw you send in a super chat to Than on a live stream on Inspiring Philosophy, and Than was rationalizing how we can explain about other miraculous accounts from other deities. And I came across that and I was going to do a reaction to it, but I never got the time to get around to doing it. And I thought to myself, what a clever epistemological, loophole to open up the door and go, well, Christianity allows the demons and all the other gods to do miracles as well. And we can open up the door to just, all these other gods and other demigods and such, they could do miracles too. So we don't dismiss this idea that other people can do miracles and do other miraculous deeds and whatnot. And I thought to myself, wow, that if that's the case, then I don't see why we can falsify them and then say yours is true. It's really unlikely to be able to do such a thing. And so anyway, I just wanted to make that comment. I did see that video and I'm thanking you, of course, by spending the time doing this because of the super chat. But this is what it said. So the problem with the hopes and aspirations argument, the person is referencing what's sometimes called the Galilean crisis thesis, the idea that Jesus' eschatological predictions weren't actual predictions, but rather hopes, desires, or aspirations that were always contingent on the Father's will. Dr. Tucker Furta has explored some of this territory. The argument essentially says Jesus wasn't wrong because he wasn't making firm predictions. He was expressing what he hoped would happen and deferring to God's timeline. Here's why that doesn't work. First, look at the language. Jesus doesn't say, I hope some of you standing here will not taste death. He doesn't say, maybe this generation will not pass away. He says, truly, I tell you. It means amen lego himen, which is the strongest affirmation formula in the Gospels. It says it's Jesus's way of saying, I am telling you this with absolute certainty. That's not the language of hopes and aspirations. That's the language of prophetic declaration. You don't preface a wish with truly, I tell you. You preface a guarantee with that. Second, Matthew 10:23 is devastating. And that's an interesting one that AI brought up because that's actually the hardest hitting one in Allison's book. By the way, I saw your video response to Dan McClellan yesterday or the day before, and I couldn't disagree with it more, my friend. I think it's mistaken. But specifically, Allison goes over this exact issue in Matthew 10 with you not going through the houses of Israel before the Son of Man comes. And he's like, that one, there's no cope skills you can get past this one. There's no way to get around this. He says it's devastating. AI says Jesus tells his disciples they won't finish going through the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. That's not an aspiration. It's a logistical claim tied to a specific concrete mission. He's sending them out and telling them the Son of Man will arrive before the mission is complete. That's a timeline, not a prayer. Third, the submitted his will to the Father move is borrowed from the Gethsemane scene where Jesus says, not my will, but yours be done. But notice what the argument actually concedes. If Jesus' eschatological predictions were his will and not the Father's, then Jesus was speaking on his own authority about things he didn't actually know, which means he was a false prophet by the Bible's own standard in Deuteronomy 18:22. If a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord and the thing does not happen, that is a thing the Lord has not spoken. Either Jesus was speaking for God and was wrong, or he was speaking for himself and was presumptuous. Neither option is good for Christianity. It gives 4, 5, and 6 outlines. It makes the argument unfalsifiable. I mean, it's like, sure, I aspired, if you saw the opening of this stream, I aspired in my heart, but made a stern prediction that by the end of this stream, everyone whose name appears on the Epstein list will be charged, convicted, and they will justice will be served on the Epstein list. By the end of this live stream tonight, this is what's going to happen. Some of my followers will likely do what you just said. Derek's heart was there, or some other way of aspiring to get Jesus or Derek off of the hook for making a failed prediction. That's what it appears like more to me. And I would go with more of many of the prophets who were making these claims. They were so stern in these predictions and so believing of them. Some of them, as Josephus accounts, went into the desert with a whole crowd of people believing they were like Moses. They were like Joshua. They believed these things were actually going to happen. And of course, history tells us what happened in Josephus. They failed. And so this gets to a crux of an issue that I brought up with Allison, is that so all these predictions with Jesus we're talking about failed. Then why did the movement succeed? If you go to Acts and you listen to the words of Gamaliel, which I don't think Gamaliel said these words, but I think Acts writes this as a story as if this really well-known rabbinic teacher is speaking. And he says, man, there's this guy, Judas, which he says came after the guy, not the Egyptian, but Theudas. He gets the chronology wrong. And I have a video coming out to show that. But he literally is talking about these characters that are doing these prophetic things. And he goes, but that movement failed. This movement, kind of hinting, winking, I think, at the reader, this movement is from God. So don't persecute this movement. Anyway, I am only reading AI, Apollo. So understand that I've not read Furta's work, but AI I have Claude here, 4.6. So if you're interested in knowing what version I'm looking at, it's Opus 4.6 right now. It understands what I'm doing and the scholarship that I'm using from critical scholars, and it understands what your comment is trying to make here. So it gets the gist of what is trying to take place here. But again, if Jesus just had hopes and aspirations, then, and they were wrong or they didn't happen, I don't see what's so special then. Like what is the major thing, that he rose again from the dead? You know what I mean? And what if that was just the hopes and aspirations of his disciples and that they were wrong too? But we believe this. There's interesting things there. Solera Knight in the Hizzy. Thank you for becoming a member of Myth Vision, my friend. And it's showing that you're doubled up on the membership here. Hold on. Let me see what's happening here, my friend. I appreciate you, man. Look, everybody show Solera some love. Solera just got saved. This is the altar call. I mean, Solera got saved. How do you feel? How's it feel to be finally saved, my friend? It's got to feel good. It's showing duplicates here on my end. So maybe it's because I have two streams rolling here. I got a thing set up where it's vertical and landscape for viewers who are checking it out on YouTube. I'm not really sure, but if it's doubled up, even better. I really appreciate the love, man. Thank you for being a member here. We can use it, and I'm going to start doing streams more and more and more. Guys like you who have the special symbol next to your name, you get to judge everyone else, okay? Christians are allowed to judge everyone else. Well, guess who gets to judge people now? You do. On the 12 thrones of Myth Vision. It's an apocalyptic prediction, but either way, hang out with me, take your seat on the throne, and judge everyone around you, okay? Totally kidding. Don't do that. Don't do that. I'm kidding around. Appreciate it. Another super chat. Holy smokes. Thank you so much. D-Bone Swish in the house. Thank you for that 5. Really appreciate it. C.S. Lewis calls these predictions the most embarrassing verses in the Bible. I feel they also contradict the entire doctrine of the Trinity. I can't see how that doesn't become a problem. Think with me for a second. Like, if God is one, as Trinitarians will argue, and there are 3 persons, like, why is there a disconnect between these things? And then they come in with the hypostatic union. He's 100% God and 100% man, but he was in his flesh. I mean, like, again, at the opening of this stream, you're hitting something very deep here, I think, D-Bone Swish. And as I'm not this guru when it comes to philosophy, I immediately could see a logical issue, right? Of how is that disconnect so obvious? For me, for example, in the previous super chat by my friend, just making sure I get your YouTube channel correct so people can go check you out, Apollos Christian Apologetics. Apollos actually brings in this point, and to this issue, like, if we were all looking at any movement in the world and it wasn't Christianity and you weren't a Christian, if we were looking at Islam and you're not a Muslim, if we were looking at Mormonism and you're not someone who follows that group, and you say Joseph Smith had predictions, if any of us looked at this material this way, we would see it and go, yeah, that's embarrassing. And then we would see logical issues. We wouldn't work overtime, double time, triple time, icing on cake to do everything we can to somehow work out the problems with our worldview if it isn't our worldview to begin with. And I think that is what's happening with apologetics. It is, I believe this thing already. I'm going to defend what I believe. And that is why I think they make anything possible work. That's just my opinion. And it's my opinion as someone who has 10 to 15 years of very extreme devout commitment to the Christian movement, commitment to reading the scriptures, commitment to believing in Jesus, praying, not just reading it like analytically and like scholastically or trying to read it as like an academic, devoutly asking God to guide me, praying sincerely, wanting him to lead me in the truth, and with every essence of my being possible. And like, I really, really wanted it. And I don't know any other way for a human to do that, but to try and ask his father for some bread. And will his father give him a stone, as the Gospels say? like, I don't know what else to say, but say that the evidence brought me to this path. And you get even Christians who I think honesty comes out and seeing the problem, even Christians like Dale Allison who say, hey, he has failed predictions there. Now, I asked Allison in the interview and I was kind because I do not want to disrespect academics that I have on my show, right? I want to keep that 100% kosher, so to speak. But I asked Allison himself, doesn't this make Jesus a failed prophet? Point blank, and logically brought him up to the edge and said, hey, according to Deuteronomy, and I was gentle with this, doesn't this make him a failed prophet? Because I don't really like that language, and he starts to do his thing. But he says, if someone takes these predictions literal, then yeah, it would make him a failed prophet. So he does answer that question. And I'm like, okay. Oh, hold on. I just got gifts. Beachcomber. Oh, snap. Beachcomber in that. Bro, he's trying to save souls. Beachcomber in the house is saving people with the true gospel. Hallelujah, man. I love you. No, I'm serious. Thank you so much for the memberships. I don't know who you gifted, but if you've been gifted tonight with a blessing of gifts for Myth Vision, speak up. I want to know who got the gifts. Because I don't know if you get to pick them. Yes, this is the altar call. Hallelujah. No, seriously, Beach, thank you for that. The membership gifts. I really appreciate it. By the way, if you don't know, I've got like dozens of videos on the membership side that aren't public. So you're getting like popcorn in your hand, private behind the scenes visuals before anyone else. And you get to drop your comments earlier and you can pretty much just like say, hey, what's up? I'm here. And then like 3 weeks later, my video goes public and your front row seat. People are like, how did they already had their comment up so long ago? That's because you were a member of the channel. Anyway, thank you so much for the membership. I really appreciate it. It means the world to me. I'm going to be doing this a lot more. So get that stamp of salvation next to your name if you're watching live and you love this channel. Doclees11, thank you for the super chat. Just a thanks for all your work. Thank you. I really do appreciate the support. I haven't been live in a while. I haven't done this in a good minute. I went through a rough patch. Life got tough. Life got really, really tough. Brother struggling with addiction, kids having problems, all sorts of stuff. Who doesn't have problems? And I'm coming out of my hole, just like Zalmoxis did, according to Herodotus. In fact, I'd love to share that one with you if I got the time, but I saw there's another super chat, so I want to get to that in a moment. But Herodotus, I got to bring that Herodotus thing up here. Herodotus was gangster with it. I think I have it in my studio next to me because I like to have it in the background. It looks all pretty. But again, thank you so much for the super chat. Love you. I'm going to keep doing more work, and I hope you'll stay tuned because we have so much more academic material, so many more angles in which we approach this stuff. I find this, what I do, a million times more fun, and there's so much more exploration than I ever did as an evangelical or as someone who was kind of stuck in the faith bubble. This is so much better to me than it was where I was before. Now, that is not to say every form of Christianity is like what I came out of. No. But the kind I came out of, we were Protestants and we believed in the word of God and it was divine revelation and we took that stuff seriously. Now, I know that someone might go, well, the Orthodox or the Catholics, they got it all right. Oh my gosh, that's a whole nother rabbit trail. Anyway, thank you so much. Jesus Hernandez in the house with the super chat. Jesus is tithing to me? Ladies and gentlemen, this is history. We're making history right now. Jesus just sent me $10. I mean, after everything I just said about him, maybe he's trying to get me to chill out. Maybe he's trying to say, Derek, stop calling me out. I'll throw you $10 if you don't call me out on the failed predictions. I don't know. But he threw me $10. Does anyone know what Jesus has to say in the chat? I do want to know who got the gifts. I do want to know who got the gifts. If you don't mind shouting out like, "Hey, I got the gifts. It's me." I don't know where's it at? I'm a Gnostic fan. Think you're a plague, Mr. Pink. Oh, Steve, thanks for the super chat. So who do you think Jesus was? Well, I think Jesus was an apocalyptic preacher. I do think he was a apocalyptic, prophetic type figure who literally had some kind of belief about the end happening very soon. He had teachings. I think he was a disciple, likely of John the Baptist, and he got himself killed. And I think he was charismatic enough of a character to his movement, just like if you go and read any history about Joseph Smith, and I'm not talking about like apologist, just historically look at the Mormon church and how it developed and the people around him and how quickly Joseph Smith gathered a following and people were gravitating to him and defending him and, you know, being part of his following. You could see how someone like that could easily become mythologized and deified. And I think that's what happened to Jesus. So I know the Jesus Seminar went through a phase for a while with John Dominic Crossan and such, where they believed that Jesus was a cynic philosopher of sorts, because some of his teachings sound like philosophy that the cynics would teach. But I'm much more inclined to think Jesus was an apocalyptic prophet. And the failed predictions do not change the success of the movement. In fact, there are studies that have been done about cognitive dissonance that show that oftentimes when a prediction fails and the cult believes firmly in the prophet, in the figure, and the teachings of these people in the group, when they're wrong, the group becomes even more fervent than they were. Double time. They even double down their belief even stronger, more committed to the truth of the belief system that actually failed. And that is in Cognitive Dissonance, Leon Festinger's book. He covers this, where he infiltrated a UFO cult and he pretended to be one of the cult members, along with other people who were taking notes about this. And the night that was predicted that the end of the world for the United States was going to happen and blood was going to flood the whole land, nothing happened. They were a quiet UFO cult, and they were not really into media, like going on the news or being in newspapers or any of that kind of stuff. After that night, when she said, it did happen, it got fulfilled, but it got fulfilled that we saved America. The blood did not flood because we, the true believers in here, did whatever we did that caused the UFOs to not send the blood that floods and destroys all of the United States. And so then they ended up appearing on news stations. They literally doubled up on what they were arguing all along. Like, they're trying to make it even more obvious that it's true when it failed. And many people were in tears and everything. Okay, let me see this. You got a super? No, Apollos, I missed it. Hold on. Let me go. Sorry, StreamYard is in the it gives me a way to find it. Fair response. Would you say the Galilean crisis is more honest response than the emphatic, explicit, conditional eschatology? Okay, I appreciate this. This is more nuanced, right? Like, Apollos, forgive me for skipping your super chat there. I really did not mean to miss that. It's hard for me to say because you can find conditional eschatology in the scriptures. With Jeremiah, you could find this. There's several places where you could find conditional eschatology, right? And it's hard to say because you can find passages in the New Testament that seem to indicate they could be understood conditionally, but I don't necessarily think that's Jesus. And many of the critical scholars who are reading the New Testament know, like, they're identifying, going, someone put that in the mouth of Jesus, right? So I want to be fair, because here's the problem. I can't adequately respond definitively, Apollos. I want to be honest. I want to be fair and say, I don't know. And the reason why is I've never read this scholar's work that you're talking about. And I don't want to just like straw man or poison the well. I want anyone and everyone who's interested in this stuff to actually read the scholar, because it may have come across as dismissive of whatever this academic's argument is. I just read you what AI already was geared toward with my critiques using critical scholarship. So I can't say which one is more likely. I can grant that there might be indicators of either. But I think that when you look at the core, there's explicit ones that I don't think can be just explained away that failed. And those are obvious to me. And I think those are the ones that are the worst ones. So, hey, man, I'm sorry I missed your super chat, dude. I don't know how, but I was scrolling through and it just didn't pop up. I hope that's a fair answer, man. I don't really know what else to say other than no, it's not, or it is. But I wouldn't be, I can't fairly say that without actually have read the scholar's work that you're talking about and then weighed out the different responses. And then on that scale, I could say, well, I think this one has more going for it than the other. But again, you know that I read the Bible not as a book. I don't read the New Testament as a book. I don't read a lot of the Bible as a book. It, to me, is many authors with different views. And even within books, this is the even tough part. This is where you get the magnifying glass out. Even within books, it looks like there may be layers or interpolations or redactions, and source criticism can be brought into the picture, different things. And I don't know, I think that everyone who's doing that has to be cautious and say, we can't be certain. So I don't know the answer to that question. Thank you so much though, man, for reminding me. I would have missed it if you didn't. Let me go back to regular chat here. Okay, Beachcomber, it is a new member. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Did anyone say that they were oh, I'm a novice. You're saved, my friend. You're saved. I don't know about the return. Let me see. Just sent you 7 and YouTube 3. Hold up. Where did I miss this at? How come I don't see it? I don't see your super chat on YouTube. What the heck is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Everyone, oh my gosh, we need the devil to leave. Something's happening here. I can't find it. Hold up. I got a membership. Mega Blood got a membership. If you haven't subscribed to Mega Blood's YouTube channel, Mega Bloodbath, you really do need to go check them out. They're debating. There's like, if you like, a clash, the name tells you all you need to know. Mega Bloodbath. There are debates, and especially if you're like an overnight person who stays up all night and you really want to like hang out, they do long streams. You're finally saved, Taco. I've been trying to save you all along, man, but I can't, make you get saved. You have to, on your own free will, choose it. Hold up. I'm looking for you. Where the Stargazer Jenny? Thank you so much. Hit the like button. It's free. Thank you. We got you as a member here. I'm looking for members. I do not know. I leaned there was a guy. I just leaned there was a guy. Now listen, this again, just like I said, I don't read the whole New Testament as one book, right? I don't just take Jesus at face value either. I tend to believe there was a guy. I kind of laid out, I think he was apocalyptic. I think he was charismatic. I think there was a guy. I think John the Baptist was real. Josephus talks about this guy, John the Baptist. He gets killed and removed from his followers. I think Jesus was likely a disciple of this guy. Don't know this. Nothing I'm saying here is certain, right? I don't want to piss anyone off here, but it's a fact that this is all based on probability. There's no certainty to this. And I do agree with Richard Carrier that you have in my opinion, two positions that make the most sense. Minimal historicism, minimal mythicism, and it's between these two. I lean that there was a guy. That I do agree with. I'm trying to find the salvation people here, man. Okay, Solera Knight super chatted me a 10 and is a member. Thank you so much, Solera. Appreciate the support. Didn't a real Messiah return, gathered a remnant of Israelites, and got the heck out of Dodge before Rome destroyed the place? This is a good point. So, Solera, there are some of those who believe that it all happened. I brought this up at the beginning of the stream. They're called full preterists. they believe it already happened. They believe that the Messiah did return in 70 AD. He gathered a remnant of his people, the people who believed, or if not, gathered all of them, and got the heck out of Dodge before Rome destroyed the place. There is an actual guy named Ed Stevens, and he's in full preterism, ED, last name's with a V, so Stevens. He believes that when Jesus told the disciples on the Mount of Olives, talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and the near end of the earth, or the end of the world, which they don't interpret it that way, that, you know, when you see the armies encircling Jerusalem, flee to the mountains. It's a command. Jesus tells them to flee to the mountains. And so what does he do? He says, well, when the armies surrounded Jerusalem, 70 AD, they did flee to the mountains. And behind the mountains, around the time of 70 AD, Jesus returned and raptured his church. He took them off the planet. And then his argument, and I don't think he realizes this. It's kind of funny to me laughing at it, because it's like, I'm not trying to mock, but I think it's kind of funny. It's like, you can't make a more unfalsifiable kind of claim that, like, behind that mountain over there, somewhere they got taken and sucked into heaven. But it helps him fix the problems in his mind about the end. There is that. I don't know if that was your intent, Solera. I hope I hit the nail on the head, my friend. Thank you for the super chat. I hope I answered that. But there are various ways some Christians will rationalize. Yes, I encourage everyone to read Dr. Furta, especially to hear the argument. I always encourage people to hear whatever the argument is on the opposite side, so you understand where they're coming from, even if that is to critique, even if that is so you're better acquainted to engage the material. Yes, 100%. Stargazer Jenny in the house with a super. Thank you, Stargazer. I really appreciate the love and the support. Means the world. If Jesus was a historical figure, do you think he had children with Mary Magdalene? This is a good one. I think she would be the best candidate, at least on the roster, if he had children. And there are some people who think that it was unlikely that a rabbi would not have children. Jesus was considered a rabbi. He was a teacher. And to be a Jewish teacher in this time, some people argue that he would have likely have had children, a historical guy named Jesus. Who knows? Some I've even heard in passing, and I don't know how true this is, said that it would have been a requirement to become a rabbi, like in rabbinic circles. Now, I don't know how you know that, because there are so many different kind of Jewish groups that may not have had the same views, and they may not have held to the same concept of you need to be married in order to be a teacher. Some were more ascetic, some weren't. But I think she's a good candidate if there was a guy and if he was married to her, for sure. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of Dan Brown stuff that comes into this that you have to be cautious about. But I think she's a likely candidate if the guy did exist. If she existed, why not? Why not, right? The other thing I think about is the reverse, right? You're talking about a very human Jesus. Notice what Christianity did. It did the opposite. It went in the direction of dehumanizing Jesus, which is why I think a human Jesus at the start makes plenty of sense to me, that he could have been mythologized, and they made him into more than and beyond just human. And if you look at it like that, no wonder they didn't even want him having siblings. Mary could not even have had sex. So now you have his mother becoming a perpetual virgin. And I would recommend a book by James Tabor. Where's it at? Here it is. He does the reverse. He tries to kind of do a little archaeology with the text, so to speak. And he has a book called The Lost Mary. I highly recommend everybody get a copy. Rediscovering the Mother of Jesus, a new historical investigation of the most powerful woman in the world, right? So inside of the sleeve, I'm just going to tease you with it. A renowned historian lifts the veil on the life of Mary and her revolutionary role as the matriarch of the Jesus movement. Mary, Mother of Jesus, is the best known and least known woman in history, revered and worshipped by millions. She remains a figment of the imagination, the ethereal subject of Raphael's and Botticelli's, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, bathed in heavenly light, too virginal and pure to move among us. But what about the real Mary, the young Jewish woman and single mother of eight to 5 boys and 3 girls? Oh, of 8, 5 boys and 3 girls. Sorry. The deviant citizen of Roman-occupied Galilee who survived through one of the most dangerous periods of Jewish history. An ancient Game of Thrones that claimed the lives of 3 of her sons, Jesus and Simon by crucifixion, James by stoning. The historical Mary, whose teachings and courageous example may in fact make her the first founder of what we now call Christianity. Anyway, it's an interesting way of saying, okay, like let's go backwards. What would a historical Jesus have looked like? It wouldn't have been scandalous for him to have kids. If there was a real guy and you don't have the, I want to use the word magic, but if you don't have the theological baggage, sure. And I think Mary Magdalene would be the best candidate. For sure. Exit Music said, Ferda's paper is available on JSTOR. Thank you so much, by the way, Stargazer, for the super. I hope that answered your question. I can't be like, I think she'd be the best candidate. That's the best answer I could say. I really can't answer that because we don't know. You know what I mean? Scrolling down here. Did we find out who all of the new people who just recently had an altar call and got saved are? Nobody made that clear yet. We don't know. We do not know who's saved and who's unsaved in this chat right now. This isn't good. This is not good. All right. I really want to show you guys some of the clip I had. Let me get a vote from you, actually. How about that? I'm going to do a poll real quick here, and I'm going to come back to it. And I want to start a poll. Let's see. There's a poll. Let me ask that. Do you want to watch Del Allison and me before everyone else? Now, that's going to have me covering some of the topics in his book. And you got yes and no. And if you answer yes or no, I'll know how many of you want to actually see that with me. I'll pause the video to take super chats, to welcome new members to the family who've recently received salvation through Myth Vision. But yeah, let's get a vote going as we continue. I want to show you something. By the way, this is what the video is going to look like. It's in good quality, So this is a website, preteristarchives.org. It's old, been around back when I was a preterist, 2002. David Green, guy named David Green. I used to talk to this guy. A lot of these guys don't like me anymore. Okay. They don't just not like me. I'm an enemy. Okay. I am a turncoat. I was a believer in the second coming of Jesus that happened in 70 AD, but still this website I think is a good place to go, because what led me to thinking Jesus did return is pretty obvious. We've been talking about Jesus making predictions. Now, I don't know about you. If you're a Christian or not a Christian in the chat, comment down below. If Jesus is God in the flesh, he is the Son of God, he is the Messiah, can Jesus be wrong? Yes or no? And type out yes, he can be wrong, or no, he can't be wrong. I want you to follow me on this journey. Everybody type out yes or no while I take this super chat. Can Jesus be wrong if you believe he's the Son of God? Wrong about the end, right? He's the Son of God. He is a prophet who predicts the end. He's God in the flesh, all of the goodies that comes with the theological baggage. Yes or no, he can be wrong. And I'd be interested to know, why someone would think he could be wrong if you believed he's God in the flesh, he's the Son of God, and he's a prophet making predictions. So can he be wrong about these predictions and still be those things? I'd be interested to hear why that someone would say that. So, gather the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Thalera, thank you for the super chat. Exodus, those left will be worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. End of Judea, world 70 AD, Matthew 10, verse 6. So let me pull up Matthew here real quick. Matthew 10. All right, let's get this Matthew 10 up. I'm using NIV, okay? I'm using NIV. All right. 10 verse 6. So here you have, right? Jesus called his 12 disciples to him, gave them authority to drive out impure spirits, to heal every disease and sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. I won't bore you with them. These 12 sent out with the following instructions. Do not, and this is such an interesting passage in Matthew. Is this in Q? I think that might be. If you think there was a Q, I tend to think there's a tradition behind Matthew, but you could be a far guy. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you in your belts. No bag for the journey, or extra shirt or sandals or a staff for the worker is worth his keep. It's really interesting to watch the synoptics disagree on this saying from Jesus. Like, some of them say, don't bring anything with you. Like, the contradictions between these gospels are so fun to watch. So if I'm understanding your question / super chat here, Solera, gather the lost sheep of the house of Israel, Exodus. Those left will be worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. End of Judea world 70 AD, Matthew 10:6. The only complaint I have is this, is he says they will not have gone through all the houses of Israel before the Son of Man comes. And I'm trying to see exactly where is that? Matthew 10. I know it's in Matthew 10. Truly, I tell you, right? It'll be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. So he's shaking the dust from their feet because they didn't show love to them as they're traveling, giving them the gospel. Be on guard. Here it is. Truly, I tell you. I mean, you can't get any more obvious, I think, when you're saying, truly, I tell you, you will not finish going through the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Now he's talking to his disciples, going through the towns of Israel. That's likely not 70 AD. It makes little sense to me that it would be 70 AD, especially when most people are now reading into Paul, trying to understand Paul's talking about we who are alive and remain at his coming and stuff. This sounds like a mission, like you pointed out, to only go for Israelites, right? Don't go to the Samaritans. Don't go to the Gentiles, the non-Israelites. Don't go to them, but only go to the Israelites, which means the Samaritans, in the author's mind, are not Israelites. Tells you a little bit about the beef between Israelites or Jews and Israelites, because Samaritans claim to be Israelites as well. But this right here, I don't think it's talking about 70 AD. I think this is a fossil that indicates a potential earlier tradition. I don't know if this goes back to Jesus or not, but it seems like there was some earlier tradition that expected that the Son of Man would come. And I don't think Jesus is talking about himself here. That's the interesting part, because there are times when Jesus is seeming to be calling himself the Son of Man and times where he's not. Like, you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, or really first he says seated at the right hand, which meant he ascended. So now he's seated at the right hand of God, and then he comes in judgment. He tells this to Caiaphas, the high priest, which that means there's two moves happening there. N.T. Wright botches this. N.T. Wright botches this whole thing to me. But I think that we're infatuated with 70 AD, and it's like this easy way of trying to simplify what's going on in the New Testament, just gravitate everything to make it 70 AD. Like, that's what full preterism ultimately does. Partial preterists, I think, are more accurate in recognizing that there was definitely 70 AD in picture, but they're more accurate even though they're wrong. Let me emphasize why. Because they recognize the problem of evil wasn't a metaphor. The problem of evil is real, a real world tangible problem that we observe on a daily basis. The Epstein files, which I brought up at the beginning of the stream, is a problem. And if you think this is the new heavens and the new earth, by any standard, if you think the things that are happening on a daily basis, the wickedness and all that, had nothing to do with what was being implied by Judaism's apocalyptic expectations of justice in the world, the real world, not a metaphor all the way down, I think you don't know what you're reading. I don't think you have, I don't want to, I almost said like, I think you have terrible reading comprehension skills, but like, I really don't think you're seeing this material for what it's trying to solve. It's trying to solve a serious problem with the real world around us. Everything becomes a metaphor. Now, I'm not talking to you, Solera. I'm talking to the full preterist that I've engaged with and was once a believer of. I'm just being real. So, some say, yes, he could be wrong about Jesus. Solera, I might have to return back, or if I see your comment addressing anything I said there, I'll try to keep an eye out. No, God in the flesh cannot be wrong. So Steve says, I say that because I think God could be wrong. Oh, okay. Okay. Gotta be omnipotent if he's God. Okay. Let's see. It's fun to be a heretic. Yeah, I enjoy it. No, he can't be wrong. So at least I agree in my mind. No, he can't be wrong. Okay. No, Francisco says, right? He can't be wrong. So Green thinks I'm wrong in minor details constantly. So yes, the odds still favor following my advice at a rate in excess of random chance. I mean, if it's God, I just don't see how God in the flesh can be wrong, guys. And I had a God who was all loving. Once I became a Calvinist, he was all loving to his chosen. He wasn't all loving to all humanity. Notice how I shifted things to make sense of it. Yes, heavenly a man after all. No, he can't be wrong if he's God in the flesh. Yes, he's only a man after all. I agree with that now, but remember, I have these stipulations saying if he was God in the flesh, if he's the Son of God, if he is a true prophet, according to Deuteronomy 18, and he made actual predictions about things that would happen, and they didn't happen. So why I brought that up and wanted you all to vote here is, as a Christian, that was what my mind had to do. There was only one path for me. Jesus is right. Jesus is wrong. Jesus wasn't wrong. He couldn't be wrong, right? You see where I'm going with this. If Jesus could not be wrong, then he was right. And when he made predictions about things that were going to happen soon, they had to happen. And since they had to happen because he can't be wrong, I'm just like really kind of giving you a logical, just consistent argument here on why I became a full preterist. It drew me to, well, he was right. He was right when they were going to happen. And he said something was going to happen. So whatever happened, happened. We misunderstood what happened. We are the ones who misunderstood what was supposed to take place. That's how I ended up becoming a full preterist, because the time statements, expectations, as I show here, are 101. Like the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Who warned you to flee the wrath that is about to come? The axe is already laid at the root, which he starts with Matthew. Isn't that interesting? This is probably a Christian who thinks Matthean priority is the case. All of these interesting little close time indicators, right? You shall not have finished, like we just talked about. You shall not have finished going through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. The age about to come, right? The Son of Man is about to come in glory of his Father with his angels, and will then recompense or repay every man according to his deeds. There are some of those who are standing here who shall not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. I've heard all of the excuses, if you can call them that, of trying to make sense of these things to me. Oh, that's the transfiguration. Oh, no, that's when he ascended on high and the Holy Spirit fell on the church in Acts. Oh, no, that's something else, right? There's always something here. That, oh, the kingdom came in 70 AD. That's full preterism for you, ladies and gentlemen. I just don't see it. I do not see this at all anymore as the case. And they go through all of these different passages. I'll put the link I'll put this in the chat. So if you wanted to ever go check out this website, you can actually see all of these time statements yourself. He goes through the entire New Testament and shows you tons and tons of examples where the time indication is very, very close. It's near, it's soon, it's about to happen. And critical scholars have noted this for the longest. Now, that's why I became a full preterist. But we need to now look at the vote here just to get an idea. Did you all vote yet? Engaged. Let me see. Did I start the? Yeah. Okay. So we have 45 votes. If you haven't voted, I'm reminding you to vote right now. Do you want to watch Dell, Allison, and me before everyone else, right? We're going to talk about his book and hear a scholar talk about this stuff. I want to hear from you on that. Okay. Solera back in the house with another super chat. Thank you so much, Solera. Those left face worst Sodom and Gomorrah in 70 AD. So you're talking specifically in this passage. I'm going to go back to it here. Matthew 10, right? And it talks about not going through all the houses of Israel. You're talking about shaking the dust from your feet, right? And he's talking about going and preaching the gospel to the towns in Israel. You could interpret this as 70 AD. You could try. I personally don't think this is talking about 70 AD. I think that at the end of the day, you're getting potentially layers here by the author, an early tradition, that this idea that they will not have even finished proselytizing. Then the end is going to happen. And the question is, did the disciples go around and actually hit all the houses in Israel? Did it take 40 years for them to go through the houses in the local regions? I mean, look how far Jesus went in his own adventures within 3 years. Are we really supposed to believe he expected 40 years to pass between this time when he's talking in the 30s and 70? I'm not convinced. I think that he thinks it's going to happen. Like, they're on a mission right now. He's telling them as he's alive, go out, do this, go preach this message of the coming kingdom. According to Matthew, they're doing it as they speak. And Jesus, if you just read the Gospels, how far he goes within the 3 years, if you guess it's approximately 3 years, that his ministry takes. John seems to indicate that it's a shorter period. But either way you slice it, I don't think this is 40 years he's talking about. I think he's talking about near and soon. The problem becomes the author's writing after the war. So now, are we going to get this mixed early tradition with potentially post-war, post-70 AD material? Maybe, and you might find some of that mixed in to this section. Like, for example, if we go and look, is this the same place that talks about you'll be before thrones and kings and all of that kind of stuff? Yeah. So here, therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local councils and be flogged in the synagogues. That sounds normal. On my account, you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. Well, remember, this is odd, okay? Why is he saying to the Gentiles? But then he's telling the very people they will not have gone through all of the towns of Israel. And he tells them, do not go to the Gentiles and do not enter the towns of the Samaritans. That's a problem. Look, 12 are sent out with these instructions by Jesus, right? Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any towns of Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of God has come near. Heal the sick, etc., right? We scroll down into the next paragraph here, which is just a few verses down. And he says, go take no copper, no pelts, nothing. Whatever town or village you enter, search for some worthy person and stay at their house until you leave. As you enter the home, give it your greeting. If the home is deserving, let your peace rest upon it. If it is not, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet. Truly, I tell you, it will be more reasonable, it will be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. I don't know about you, but all of Israel was not judged in 70 AD. Jerusalem got judged and razed by Rome. And when I read the story of Sodom and Gomorrah versus the story of Jerusalem, it depends on how you want to rate this. Depends. But Sodom and Gomorrah was like literally cosmic. I mean, there was fire coming down from heaven, literally, according to the story. That sounds like cosmic justice, that God's supposed to really bring judgment. And I know I'm jumping outside of this text, and I shouldn't do that because each author needs to be dealt with. But if you go to the book of Acts, which the author of Luke seems to have written, Paul is all the way in Athens. We should probably turn there real quick, okay? Just to give you an idea of what I'm saying. Now, that doesn't mean that the Gospel of Matthew agrees with Paul's point here. But Paul is in Athens. He goes to Berea. He goes to Athens. He goes to the synagogues. And then he's like, you know what? He's bored. And he says, you know what? He stood up in the meeting at the Areopagus and said, people of Athens, I see in every way, right? You are very religious, for I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship. I even found an altar with the inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. Now watch this. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples made by human hands. He is not served by human hands, as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man, he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him, perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live, we move, and have our being, as some of your own poets have said. And that's a pagan. Epimenides said this, but other authors also said this. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance. But now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. Okay, now one can go to Matthew and say, I don't care. Matthew says what Matthew says, and I don't think it agrees with Acts. Cool, we could do that. You still internally have a problem here where he says, don't go to the Gentiles or the Samaritans, but then tells you, right down here, on my account, you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. So which is it? Jesus doesn't want them on a mission to the Gentiles, but a few verses later, they're going to be forced before kings, and they're going to be obviously witnesses to the Gentiles. Well, we know when you get to the end of Matthew, in Matthew 28, after the resurrection of Jesus, according to this book, there's a great commission to the Gentiles. So during the lifetime of Jesus, I call it the earthly ministry of Jesus. He has an Israel-centric view. Only go for Israelites. That seems to be his mission, to save the Jews, okay? Once he dies and rises according to the story, you get hints throughout the story about that future Gentile mission when a centurion comes up, or a Syrophoenician woman, or a Canaanite, depending on which gospel you read. Various people who are outsiders to that world come in, and he still blesses them. He still cures their kids or heals them and such. At the end of the Gospel of Matthew, you do get the greater commission to go into all the world. That is why I think this author is dealing with a mixture of material that if you don't take the whole book into consideration, you won't see. But to Acts 17, that judgment cannot be 70 AD. It makes zero sense to tell people in Athens, literally telling these Epicureans and Stoics, I believe they're Epicureans and Stoics. Yeah, so you got Stoic philosophers, Epicurean and Stoic philosophers in Athens at the Areopagus, telling them, hey guys, in the past, God looked over or overlooked such ignorance, but now commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set the day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. So at least according to Luke Acts, the whole world is about to be judged, even all the way in Athens. You need to watch out. It makes no sense to be telling them and warning them about 70 AD in Athens. This is one of the problems I started seeing as a full preterist. And as I was honest, I said, holy crap. Okay, you got problems here. He's obviously not talking about 70 AD, right? One more thing before I come back to the live stream chat. If anyone super chatted, whatever, become a member, whatever, I'm going to acknowledge you in just a moment. But I think this is important as I'm making my point here. Some of the full preterists have gone so down the words don't mean words road that when they say the God who made the world, right? I believe this might be oikumene, it may be cosmos. I'm not sure which Greek term is behind this English translation. And everything in it, the Lord of heaven and earth, they literally do not believe that this is talking about the God who actually made the world, according to this text, and everything in it, the heaven and earth. They don't believe it's talking about the heavens. They don't believe it's talking about the actual earth. They think this is so local and so specific that it's only talking about like Israelites in the land of Jerusalem, or Israelites right there in that local land that was promised to Abraham way, 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 way back here. That's the only, like, they localize it so much to get their systematic theology to work that they go like way too far. They go so far to say, like, from one man he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth. Well, maybe, and I don't want to straw man them, they might go, one man? Oh, that's probably talking about, Abraham, and all the nations are his seed. This is the kind of interpretations they do to make it make sense for them. And that they should inhabit the whole earth. Well, that's just the whole land. Earth is land. So the whole earth is Israel, the land promised to Abraham. Why is he in Athens talking to Stoics and Epicureans at a pagan location where they're philosophizing over 1,000 miles away from the place that's supposed to be judged in 70 AD, when these guys have nothing to worry about? And he's warning them. That's a big problem. So I don't want to like straw man or anything, but I've seen every excuse under the sun to try and fix this problem from the full preterist angle. And they realize the problem. That's why they make things up to make it fit. That's why they make things up. Okay. All right. Coming back. All right. Ever considered little season eschatology? Denise Morton 8. Little season. I don't know what that is. Let me ask AI if it knows. Do you know what little season eschatology is? Let's see. It's thinking. Yeah, this is a wild one, and it's been gaining serious traction online recently. Here's the breakdown. What little season eschatology claims? The core idea comes from Revelation 23 and 7, where Satan is bound for 1,000 years and then loosed for a little season to deceive the nations before the final judgment. Little season eschatology, SLS, takes this and builds an entire alternative history around it. Here's what they believe. Jesus literally physically returned in 70 AD at the destruction of the temple. That's what full preterism teaches. The rapture, the tribulation, Armageddon, and the second coming have all already happened. After that, Jesus established a literal 1,000-year kingdom on earth, which they identify with the Byzantine Empire or the medieval period. And now, after that millennium ended, Satan has been released for his little season. And that's the age we're currently living in right now. We are in the period of Satan's deception. Okay, hold on. It's got a lot more here, but here's the problem with that, okay? If this is accurately depicting what is the little season, 1,000 years, you're talking the medieval period, it's been 1,000 years. That's not a little season, that's a long season. So I'm already having problems with the timeline here of how to make sense of this, the little season thing, but it sounds like a form of full preterism that is mixed with post 70 AD ideas, because Satan needs to be loosed and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah, I had never really heard of that, but let's see. 70 AD was day of judgment. You could say a judgment fell, but the day of judgment that was expected clearly would not fit 70 AD, Solera. That's what full preterists teach. Another example would be this. Let me show you, because this is exactly the criticism that was brought up, not interpreting, right here. No, where did it go? Oh, I have it as a PDF. Bear with me. So I'm going to show you something that I have not shown anybody. This was sent to me. Oh, wrong one. Sent to me by John J. Collins, and he wrote this in response to N.T. Wright. So Mark 13 in the context of Jewish eschatological expectations, right? And he goes on to like explain N.T. Wright's basic beliefs, and he's trying to use Daniel to try and talk about this being fulfilled. Prophets and Messiahs in the first century cover some of the historical data that shows like there were real people trying to make this stuff happen. They literally were attempting to make these prophecies about themselves. The Egyptian, we all know about these guys: Judas, Judas the Galilean, Simon, one of the Simons in the Jerusalem temple, even believed he was a prophet. You get this even with Judas Maccabees, right? Let me see. Josephus comments about this. And Gascala, John of Gascala, gets talked about this. He goes deep into this, and he's critiquing about why it's not 70 AD, why it's not a metaphor, right? On Mark, just the earliest gospel we have on Mark. Messianism defined. Jesus did not proceed to establish a kingdom in Jerusalem. His fate, capture, and execution was essentially similar to that of the other messianic pretenders in the early Roman era. For Mark, the other early followers of Jesus, however, this was not the end of the matter. Jesus was not that kind of Messiah, and Mark is at pains to convince his readers that Jesus himself had told them to expect something quite different from the typical messianic scenario. And he goes on and on. I mean, I really, really don't know if he's published this yet. This was sent to me 2 or 3 years ago by John Collins, One Like the Son of Man. But this idea that the final judgment happened in 70 AD, I would just honestly turn to 2 Peter. And this is another one that they go to. Let's pull up 2 Peter. So coming back to scripture, 2 Peter. This kind of shows you words don't mean words. It's 2 Peter 3. Words don't mean words when a lot of this stuff gets brought up in full preterist circles. And listen, I agree that the signs that are described in Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, but specifically Mark, Matthew, and Luke, are the signs of the temple's destruction. The problem is that is the final judgment, because also what is expected is the final resurrection. So what full preterists do is they go, oh, the final judgment happened. Oh, but the final resurrection, metaphor, symbolic. But judgment isn't? Odd. It's very odd that resurrection is not understood the same way in a material sense as judgment. You would think both hand in hand, when Jesus is said to come and return with the angels of God and judge those, recompense each man according to their deeds, those who are righteous and those who aren't, he's supposed to reward the good and punish those who are bad. Where is the physical, historical rewarding of the good? All you have is destruction. You have judgment, right? And people go, that's the final judgment. No, those are signs. Those are signs that he's saying that the near end of the world is going to happen. I remember as a 13 or 14-year-old in Puerto Rico, we're living on the military base. 9/11 happened. We're on a military base, mind you. My father's a Green Beret in the Special Forces, the whole nine. When 9/11 happened, I believed the second coming was literally about to happen. Not that the destruction of those towers was the second coming, but that these were signs that the end was about to happen and the earth was about to be completely renewed by Jesus. That is what I mean. So what I think happens is full preterists conflate the temple's destruction with that final eschatological justice is served and the problem of evil is solved. And the reason why I think this is a problem, both for full preterist and partial, is Jesus is expecting it in this time frame. But the full preterists make it metaphor. They go, I'll pull the metaphor card out. Because we know he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. He's hinting at the building blocks. Not one stone will be left upon another. But then, what does he do? We pull out the metaphor card. Partial preterists pull out the futurist card. And they say, no. We know evil will be dealt with in the future. We just don't know when. And that's when 2 Peter 3 comes in. Dear friends, this is now my second letter to you. I've written both of them as reminders to stimulate you to wholesome thinking. I want you to recall the words spoken in the past by the holy prophets and the command given by our Lord and Savior through your apostles. By the way, scholars think this is a forger, literally probably written in the 2nd century. Above all, you must understand that in the last days, scoffers will come scoffing and following their own evil desires. They will say, where is this coming he promised? Ever since our ancestors died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation. But they deliberately forget that long ago, by God's word, the heavens came into being and the earth was formed out of water and by water. By these waters also, the world of that time was deluged and destroyed. It was flooded. By the same word, the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. So what do full preterists do? It's actually interesting. It's an interesting, complete cope, I think, of what they do to this. They say, first off, many of them will say, well, the flood was local. That flood of waters was a local flood, and that local flood, it's not global, right? It's not the whole earth. Then they come to this and say, this is local, and this is talking about Jerusalem. And they say that the destruction of the elements by fire, that the end is going to end by fire. They say that those elements are the elements inside of the Jerusalem's Holy of Holy temple, not the actual elements of the cosmos, which is quite, literally a way to get away from what is happening here. Because here's what ends up happening in the next verse. But do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything done in it will be laid bare. No, that's just 70 AD. And how does that solve the problem of death? Again, the whole point that Jesus rises from the dead according to the New Testament. How do you solve the problem of death? Death doesn't mean death. When it talks about no more death in Revelation, it's not talking about death. It's talking about something else. Because then they go back to Genesis and they say, in the day you eat, you will surely die. Now remember, can God lie? Can God be wrong? Can God get things wrong? No. So when they read Genesis and it says, God says, in the day you will die, that you eat, did they die? The Christians will ask. Yes, they did. But he went on to live 900 and something years more. How did he die? Death doesn't mean death, ladies and gentlemen. So death doesn't mean death anymore, and soon doesn't mean soon anymore. And the elements of the cosmos and the earth and the waters that flooded the earth, like, there's an interesting book. Again, I brought this up in before. This is written by full preterists, Beyond Creation Science, New Covenant Creation from Genesis to Revelation. If you look at that cover, you'll see the temple, the Ark of the Covenant, and waters, right? Some of these people have gone so far in interpreting words to mean what they want so that it makes sense of the Bible, that these waters represent nations, people, not actual water, okay? The flood of Noah is not actually about water, flooding an actual earth where a boat is actually saving people. No. And that ark is not really an ark in Genesis. It's the temple. So this is how far they go to reinterpret things. The holy people and those who are outsiders, nations, those who are strangers in Israel, they get in the ark. They get into the temple to be saved by those outside. The Romans are the waters that come around the Jerusalem temple, or the nations in the first temple, like Babylon was the waters surrounding Jerusalem. So they reinterpret all this stuff to make it make sense. And so words stop meaning words at some point. I just think it's important that people actually understand why real academics who have PhDs and study the Greek study these texts like they would any other ancient predictions in Second Temple literature, like find Dead Sea Scroll material in Qumran, find any other apocalyptic literature literally around the time of the apocalypse of John, like Fourth Ezra or 1 Enoch, various apocalyptic material. They read this and they treat it like they would the New Testament. And they don't walk away with full preterism or forms that say the judgment happened. Sorry for the long rant, but I think it's worth educating and letting people know what's out there. Solera Knight says, Rome did rain fire on Jerusalem. Duh. Yeah, exactly, Solera. They do attack them. Duh, of course. But that's not the final judgment. That's why partial preterists still hold on. That's why full preterists need this literal historical event to be the final judgment. They need a literal historical event, and they love running to metaphor when it doesn't suit that end of Jerusalem. They love to go, that's apocalyptic language. That's metaphor. They want to save the Savior. The Savior needs saving, it seems. Thank you so much for the super chat. Denise Morton 8 says, you should check out Gunnar Heinsen's work on the fall of Rome, alternative chronology. It weirdly intersects with a lot of your work, and Little Caesars aren't preterist. We will die on that hill. Okay. It seems like a form of preterism, like the temple in 70 AD, there's some return of Jesus, but I could be wrong. I don't know this theology inside and out. Are you a Little Caesar? Are you someone who believes in the little season? Let me scroll down here and check you out. See if you see this. I'm waiting to see if there's any response here. Bear with me. We're going to get to Allison soon, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, it always ends up being like that, Lisa. I mean, look, I really was scared. I was 14. I was a little like devout evangelical Christian, and 9/11 happened, and I really believed this is it. And then even more obvious to me, which you'd have to be living in Puerto Rico where I was at on the base, the entire base was under complete shutdown and guard. No one was allowed to enter or exit the base during the hours that the attacks happened. And they had full armor suited, like you couldn't see any flesh. Soldiers in complete armor with riot shields marching down our roads. Literally just, I'm going to stand up here. Literally just, marching down the roads in my front yard, and they're going like combat weapons and all. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, the end of the world is about to happen. There I am in Puerto Rico thinking the end of the world is going to happen, and something was happening in New York. And of course, Washington and such. So I'm going to go get a glass of water. I'll be right back because I did not come prepared. And hopefully we can hear from our friend on whether or not they are Little Caesars. I'll be right back. Bear with me. Be sure to vote, by the way. All right. Wife was asking how much longer. I said, I don't know, probably about another hour. Probably another hour. No pee break. Just grabbing a thing of water here, trying to survive. All right. Are we Little Caesars here, Denise? You are a Little Caesar. Okay, well, my AI model, right, which I have here under Opus 4.6 on Claude, it has obviously I'm approaching this from a critical scholarly perspective. It says this, and I'm going to read what it has to say. You super chatted the money, and I think it's only fair that I give you at least its response to what I have. Okay, this is coming from critical scholarship. This is where it goes from fringe theology to full-blown conspiracy territory, because if the millennium already happened and all records of Christ's literal earthly reign have been erased, that means history itself has been falsified. And so Little Season eschatology fuses with a whole constellation of conspiracy theories to explain why we don't see evidence of this 1,000-year kingdom. They claim the Dark Ages were actually Christ's reign, relabeled by deceivers, that hundreds of years were fabricated and inserted into the timeline, phantom time hypothesis, that Tartaria was a real advanced Christian civilization that was erased from history, that the elaborate classical architecture found around the world, cathedrals, government buildings, world fair structures, was actually built during the millennial kingdom and then repurposed or destroyed, and that mud floods buried evidence of this prior civilization. They also claim Jesus and the saints may currently be physically present on Earth in a hidden location. Some say the North Pole. Santa Claus, anybody? Waiting for the final Gog and Magog battle. That's interesting because that seems to be what Jewish eschatology had in mind, and even in Islam, at least with the wall that was built by Alexander the Great between the Scythian region and, of course, further south. So AI says why it's growing. Here's what's actually interesting about this from your perspective, Derek. Little C's in eschatology is essentially what happens when Christians take the failed prophecy problem seriously, but refuse to leave the faith. Think about it. These people read the same verses you cover in your script, and I've got a whole bunch of verses, but everyone who's read the New Testament a lot knows about this stuff. Jesus said soon. Jesus said this generation. Paul said we who are alive. And instead of concluding that Jesus was wrong, they conclude that Jesus was right. And history is the lie. They'd rather throw out all the recorded history than admit the prophecy failed. Interesting. It's actually a perfect example of your three groups from the Epstein analogy at the opening that I brought up, except this is a fourth group you didn't even consider. People who accept the prediction was literal and accept the timeline was imminent, but then conclude that it did happen and the entire world is lying about it. They've gone past metaphorizing, past timeline extending, and straight into reality denial. Why it's relevant for your content. This could honestly be its own stream because it demonstrates something profound about the psychology of failed prophecy. When the cognitive dissonance gets so strong or strong enough, people will literally rewrite the history of civilization before they'll say, he was wrong. It's the same pattern you see in every predictive cult. The Millerites after the Great Disappointment of 1844. The Jehovah's Witnesses after 1914. Heaven's Gate, the QAnon trust the plan crowd, but taken to an extreme that makes all the others look rational by comparison. Wow. And it said it could write up something like it could give me a whole bunch more. So Denise, I did not know about this little seasoners thing, but it sounds like it would be perfect on somewhere like Twitter or something like that. There's there's so much there that I can't even imagine I'm not even covering in this, but I really do appreciate your super chat and all the support. I'm wondering where you heard this movement. Where did you get convinced by this idea? I'm curious. If you don't mind commenting that, I really would appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for the super chat. Joel Osteen is the way, the truth, and the light. No one gets to the Father except through giving Joel Osteen all your money. Joel Osteen, man. That guy, he does like self-help to the fullest, doesn't he? He tries not to be negative as much as possible in everything he has. And I think Jesus had more warnings in his texts. If you take the whole New Testament, there's more warnings than there is like positive statements. So when you've gotten to a place where your church is teaching you only positive things, good. They've left teaching the New Testament and they've gotten more into let's just give ourselves something good to look forward to and be good in life and be nice to each other and all that kind of stuff. I think that's better than really trying to teach what the New Testament seems to be teaching. Denise said, not 100%, but that's a pretty fair sum. And not Santa Claus but St. Nicholas of Myra. Yes. So yeah, I imagine I'd be curious to know where you heard this from. Mega Bloodbath. I think your super chat goal is broken. Huh. Is it? Yeah, it must be. Timer ended before reaching a goal. I don't know if I put 3 hours on, so I don't know why I did that. Dang it. I could start another goal. Let's see. We'll go for another hour. Let's see. I'll put 2 hours on. Let's see what happens. It'd be cool to see. I don't know if we could get. It'd be awesome to see if we can get 20 or 30 super chats. I'll do 20, and then at the end, you will get me speaking in tongues, blessing you all. You all. I don't. Thanks for making that heads up. All right, I started the goal. I don't know why it timed out because I put 3 hours before the live stream, but thank you for the heads up, Mega Bloodbath. I'm putting 2 hours on. So be sure to super chat your questions, and whatnot. I'm trying to hit some goals here and keep this YouTube thing going so we could do a lot more live streams. Good eye. Solaris says Earth was flat in those days. A local flood would be a global, no concept of global. You're right. I would imagine it was global in the sense that the entire Earth, but even if it was flat, it wasn't just the land of Israel or Jerusalem, if that makes sense. Jesus, I'm going to start speaking in tongues soon. If we can hit that goal, you're going to hear me go crazy. I'm going crazy. I might look ridiculous, but I don't care, okay? Because the Spirit will take over. Can I get a witness? You know what I'm saying? Jesus in the house throwing a 5 at me. Okay, I think I made sure I hit all those supers. Now, I'm thinking about hitting this video and watching it with you all. I will pause to take super chats and questions and whatnot. They, of course, help, but I've never released this. So if you are not already a member, you will see this. The members who are here will see this. But I'm going to go ahead and play. Let me see, where's it at? Delcy Allison Jr. And if you want me to turn this off, super chat. If you want me to freaking address anything, I'll pause it. Taking super chats and memberships and stuff like that, I'll do it. But I really want people to see Delcy Allison Jr., who's a Christian academic who's written on this subject for a long time. And I interviewed him recently. This is not public, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope if you're watching this now, when I make this public, please take the time to play it, even in the background. I don't care if you walk away from your computer, just to give me some watch time. Come on now, help me out. All right. Man, did you call? Here we go. Let me know if you can hear it too when I start it. Welcome back to Myth Vision Podcast, everyone. Today, I have the honor of sitting down with one of the most respected voices in history. I butchered that as I was going. I was like, today. And I messed up and I just kept it in there. Right there. First 3 seconds, hot take, ladies and gentlemen. You ready? Doing it again. We got to hear my butcher. I even took my face off the screen because today. Here we go. Starting over. Welcome back to Myth Vision Podcast, everyone. Today, I have the honor of sitting down with one of the most respected voices in historical Jesus research, Dr. Delcy Allison Jr. Dr. Allison. Okay, should I speed this up? I think I should. Can I do 1.5? Tell me if this is too much. Ready? Is a distinguished professor of New Testament at Princeton Theological Seminary and a scholar whose work has shaped the field for decades. His depth, nuance, and intellectual honesty have made him a guiding figure for anyone trying to understand the historical, literary, and theological dimensions of early Christianity. In today's conversation, we will be exploring his latest book, Interpreting Jesus. You must get a copy of this book. It is amazing. Hands down, must read if you really want to understand some of the latest, greatest thinking that's coming from Dr. Allison. You have to get it. It's a remarkable collection of studies that digs into how Jesus has been understood, portrayed, and reimagined across history. We'll talk methodology, memory, myth, history, and the complex task of evaluating ancient sources with both rigor and humility. So I'm excited for this one. Let's dive in. Dr. Allison, welcome back to Myth Vision, my friend.
Happy to be back. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. And I have a lot of fans who watch. I let him know before we streamed, I was like, or recorded. I said, hey, I've got some questions. I'm giving a little pushback to your book. All respectful, you know what I mean? But I do have some, some things I want to try and push you on. And I do push him on some stuff here. Vision, who you're their favorite scholar. They enjoy the honesty. They love the self-critique along the way of, wow, maybe I'm wrong. And sometimes in the middle of a sentence, you'll literally say what this person says and you go, well, if they're right, everything I'm about to say is wrong. And like, it's like so cool to see a scholar who's just like, so if you think they're right and you hear what I'm saying, I'm wrong. And it's like, interesting. Like David Friedrich Strauss, I highlighted one of your passages. You're like, well, if you grant, in fact, if I may, I could read it, but I'm going to in one of the questions. So before we get there, again, there's the book. Go get a copy. It's quite priced well, Dell, for a hardcover. I'm actually impressed by that price being a hardcover. And so I don't know. That's an amazing.
Hold on, Solera, you've thrown money at me all night. I have to say, Israelites, of course, did flee and escape Rome. Of course. I mean, you had some that went to Masada, right? But they formed new kingdoms. What are you talking about? I'm really interested to know what you're specifically referring to.
Price range when usually books like this that I end up getting on Amazon are like $40-50 or more. If they're coming through an academic press, they're, arm and a leg, as they say.
They're unaffordable if they're from an academic press.
Yes, sir. And this is well written, so go get you a copy. Anything you want to say before we actually get started here on diving into questions about the book and your scholarly?
No, just that I had fun writing it, and I thought I was done with Jesus in 2010. That's when I wrote my last book on the historical Jesus, and I had thought that, well, I have some other ideas I'd like to explore, and then I think I'll give them to graduate students, and then I just decided I'd rather do them myself rather than hand them to other people. So that's in part what's behind that book, and it's just fun.
You find that out in the very first paragraph, actually. I loved it. After completing Constructing Jesus 2010, which I firmly believed would be my last book on the historical Jesus, I said to my wife, honey, a skeptic reading this will love this. Honey, I'm done with Jesus. Her immediate response was, he'll be glad to hear that, but I was wrong. I have been unable to stay away. What he thinks now, I do not know. I love your writing style. So people have to get the book. Dr. Allison, as I read your book, just before I ask the question, I struggle. I struggle with where do we honestly land with this? And I think that you're going to see within the questions your own struggles, which you do reflect in a lot of these like closing statements about it and your own self-critiques, or even, maybe this is this, maybe this is that. And that's what I love about your work, that I also struggle with the same issues. And I think I carry baggage. If I'm laying my cards out up front, I have bias for wanting to look for literary. And I know that's a bias of mine because I repeat it on often interviews and discussions with scholars, whereas I might lean into the literary over memory or history in a situation. And I'm tempted to think that that's more plausible often, but I can't prove it's not. And so I wrestle. So with question number 1, Dr. Allison, in chapter 1 of this book, you cover the tensions in the tradition on page 3, which shows the text that suggests delay or some interim of the end. And I could turn there real quick just to point out, like you mentioned, Mark 2:22, Mark 13, like all of these, the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away or taken from them, and then they will fast in that day. And you go through a list of these tensions that seem to sound like there's a delay. And then you flip the page over, and I messed up on pronouncing these names, but I'll try again, to page 5, and you revisit the views of Johannes Weiss and C.J. Cadu. Okay,
Cadu.
I did it. Cadu. Suggesting that Jesus may have shifted his expectations because he viewed the arrival of the kingdom as contingent on Israel's repentance. You write that Jesus eventually foresaw an interim period due to his disappointment with his generation. My critical question is this. To an outsider, contingent eschatology looks very much like a theological safety valve designed to protect Jesus from being wrong. And if Jesus prophesied a near end that didn't happen, and we retroactively apply contingency to say, well, the people didn't repent, so God delayed it, haven't we made Jesus' prophecy unfalsifiable? How do you distinguish between a historically contingent prophecy and a plain old failed prediction? And maybe you could define those terms for viewers who may not know what contingency all about.
So from my point of view, and I hope I said this at one point, I'm not doing theology in that chapter. I'm just looking at 2 sets of data and saying they don't go together well. And one option is that we've misinterpreted them and they really do go together, right? And so more conservative scholars would, try to harmonize everything. I don't think they go together well. And if I had to choose between the two, I say this up front, it would be the material about the near end, right? And there are scholars, many scholars, who think that all of the traditions which imply some sort of interim period are later or from the church. And it's occurred to me not as a theologian, but as...
By the way, super chat any questions and comments or whatever. I'm trying to hit a goal here within an hour, and then I'm going to be getting off here, if you don't mind.
An historian, that you could keep these two together. And in fact, this was fairly common in the 19th century, and it still lives on in some scholars at the beginning of the 20th century. And I'm trying to think here historically. So where I start out actually is with rabbinic texts, right? I say, look at all these rabbinic texts where the rabbis say, oh, it hasn't come because of such and such. Now, that is apologetical. But I'm not trying in this chapter to say Jesus wasn't wrong, because I hope I make this clear, that I think Jesus, whatever he expected, didn't expect history to go on in its current form much longer. So when I say interim period, I'm not saying 2 millennia. I'm not saying 1,000 years. I'm not even saying a century. I don't think he has anything like that in mind. So the problem of a near expectation is still there for the theologian or the Christian believer. There's no way, given what I'm arguing here, to get away with that. So I don't see this as apologetics. I know that some people use it in apologetical terms. I know that happens online. I know that people will do that or have done that with my work here, but that's not what I'm doing. You still have, from my point of view, the problem that Jesus expects things to wind up soon. He has just decided at the end that he'll likely die before, everything resolves itself. I also should add that this is a hypothesis. I don't regard this as certain or nearly certain. I just regard it as a really interesting way of thinking through the materials and the conflicts that you have. And I'm just trying to do it here in an imaginative way. And ultimately, I'm going back to Johannes Weiss, for example, who's thinking about this 125 years ago and sees the conflict and then, thinks, okay, this must be what happened. It was pretty common in the 19th century for liberal scholars to think Jesus had two plans, or that he originally had a Galilean springtime and everything was great and he was confident and optimistic. But then at the end he realized, this isn't going to work out and I'm going to die. And then they try to understand his psychology in terms of these two stages or two phases. It's actually, in a weird way, although he never refers to earlier work, it foreshadows in a bit what John Dominic Crossan did. If any of your listeners are familiar with his work, he sees a two-stage Jesus. He thinks originally Jesus was very much like John the Baptist, and he's really into apocalyptic and so on, but then he has a second phase where he's rejected the apocalyptic phase. Now, what Crossan is trying to do there is he's trying to harmonize two things he sees in the tradition, and then he does them in terms of stages. I'm doing the same sort of thing. Formally, it's the same sort of solution. That is, I'm looking at the data. It's not all consistent. Here's an interesting way of making some sense of it. I am sure that some of the material that implies an interim or a delay comes from the church. I have no doubt about that. But there's a lot of it. And so I thought, well, let's just think this through if some of this reflects what Jesus thought. And, it's always possible that Jesus went up to Jerusalem and thought, I'm going to die, and the end will come 24 hours later or something like that. Right. But in this book, I'm arguing that that's not the case. Anyway, the short of this is that I am not here doing theology, and I don't think this gets you out of your problem.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of stole my next question out of your answer, which kind of is a follow-up. I say it's been roughly 2,000 years. I would like to be clear with my question, and I sincerely hope the answer is clear for people. And I ask that because, it's easy to misinterpret people online. And in fact, I've heard through the circles online, Dr. Allison, you have changed your views on the near imminent, there's been all sorts of stuff, as you know. Is it safe to suggest that what Jesus was expecting, whether one supposes an interim or delay, or he changed his mind to some extent, maybe throughout his life, whatever kind of hypotheses?
Stargazer Jenny in the house with another super duper. Really enjoying the stream. Keep up the great work, Stargazer. Keep gazing at the stars because you are one. No, seriously, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate the love and support. And thank you so much. Let's continue.
We might want to do to explain the tensions between near and the, not even the Son of Man knows, these various kind of passages that might indicate this, that either way you slice it, 2,000 years passing, that these expectations by Jesus failed to materialize.
Yes. So for me, Jewish eschatology is a way of addressing the problem of evil from a monotheistic context. So you have a real problem if you have one God and you have all this evil in the world, but your God is good and very powerful and so on. And God must fix things. God must make things right. God must win in the end. And if God, loves everybody, is in love with the world, surely it's going to be now, because things are rotten, things are terrible, things are miserable. So I think that eschatology, God is going to fix things, and it's going to be soon, is a way of dealing with the problem of evil. And the problem of evil hasn't been solved. It's still with us, right? And Christians still pray for the coming of the kingdom. So I am sure that Jesus' followers would have been dumbfounded to hear that what happened was you got a world religion, and it's gone on for 2,000 years. That's just not what...
I also think Jesus would be dumbfounded that people thought that the kingdom was the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, or like, this is the kingdom today. Like, I think he'd be dumbfounded by that.
They're thinking. Now, it may be that in 2 Peter, which I think is a mid or late, even late 2nd century text, I think it's the latest thing in the New Testament, there's explicit wrestling with the problem of delay. And the answer is, a day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, right? Okay, so it's a rationalization. But I think up until, let's say, the Gospel of John, most Christians in this movement are hoping for or expecting a near end. That's the case for Paul. I think you can read it in Acts, even though the author of Luke Acts is sensing some delay. But I think his traditions show that these people thought things were going to wrap up. It's obvious from the Gospel of Mark. It's obvious to me from the Gospel of Matthew. So there are things eventually that you have to rethink, but that's not going on yet with Jesus on a large scale. That is, the apocalypse is still what it's always been, and it's still coming. It's not what you get with the Gospel of John, where you're really, in my judgment, reinterpreting traditional beliefs in a new way.
Now, I don't mean this follow-up question to be cynical. I mean this as a sincere question, because many skeptics online who are debating with many apologists, and there's constant back and forth, they would look at this and they would just say, question, wouldn't this make him a false prophet? And so with that bold, blunt statement, is Jesus by this criteria a false prophet? How would we address this? There's the tension between faith and just someone on the outside who would have no problem saying maybe Muhammad was a false prophet, right? Someone would say that. But within the tradition, there are more liberal approaches to people who are Muslims. They wouldn't want to call it that. They might try to soften the blow or explain it away. And I think cognitive dissonance would be a natural thing to look at as to how are they going to rationalize and explain the delay. So by the definition, I think it's somewhere in the Old Testament.
Yeah, it's Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, false prophet. If a prophet says something's going to pass and then it doesn't pass, okay, well, that's rather simplistic to my mind. I actually think, so what I'm going to say now, you may not think makes any sense at all, but I don't think that foreseeing things is a God-given ability. I've seen a couple of things before they happened. They had totally secular context. This isn't the place to discuss this, but I think anticipating things or seeing things before they happen, however it's explained, is something.
So just so we're on the same page, like Allison is open-minded to premonitions, and like he thinks humans can have abilities to seeing stuff in the future. He's much more of a, I don't want to say supernaturalist, but he calls it meta-natural in his book. But he's much more open to those things than I am, and he thinks there's like real reasons to believe that kind of stuff. So
that just happens. Golly,
it's hard.
I don't like to say failed prophet, because that is a phrase that's pulled right out of Deuteronomy, and that has all sorts of connotations. I'm perfectly happy to say that what Jesus prophesied or expected did not come to pass. But if you want me to now walk inside a church, having said that, what I would say is that, again, eschatology is supposed to solve the problem of evil. Now, the problem of evil has never been solved by Christians. In other words, God is good, God is all-powerful. Why do we have a world that's so horrible, right? God can fix things, and God has to fix things. So I think the sort of eschatology that Jesus has is born of his monotheism and his sense that God is good, but the problem of evil doesn't get solved. It's not been solved. So what's called the delay of the parousia, or the delay of the second coming, for me is just the problem of evil with a timestamp. All right? It's the same thing. If God is good, if God is all powerful, if the world is evil, God will fix it today. Why would God wait 5,000 years to fix all the mess? All right. So Christian philosophers and theologians, they have wrestled with this. They have, some ideas, but none of their ideas solve the problem once and for all. So everybody can say, yeah, we're convinced. The problem of evil is still a problem. In fact, it's the major problem, I think, obstacle to Christian belief. In fact, if you were to go out on the sidewalks of a city and ask, why don't you believe in God? I think most people who don't believe in God would say something like, well, the world's too horrible, or there's just too much evil, something like that. So I just think this is the same problem. So what you have here, if you're somebody like me, is you have conflict. So there are things about Christianity that you believe and that you very much like and you very much treasure and so on. And that there are other things in it which don't make sense to you, or you don't know how to solve them, or they're real problems, right? They produce cognitive dissonance. I'm weird enough, or liberal enough, or whatever the term is, to be able to live with both of them, because I don't know of any worldview at all that into which everything fits. Right. I really don't. I can't be a reductionistic materialist. I think that's been falsified. But there are all sorts of major problems for all the world religions, right? So, I'm just, I suppose at the end of the day, I'm a modern person, and some of my good friends wouldn't like this, but Christianity for me is like standing at the line of a delicatessen. You have all these things that it offers you, and you pick out what is valuable for you or what you believe, but there are other things that you don't, or that you just can't believe, right? So hell, for example, is a really important part of our tradition, and people like me who grew up in liberal churches don't want to face it. But if you look historically, up until the 19th century, this is a really important belief for Christians. I simply can't believe it. That's it. And so then I have to deal with that part of the tradition. For me, this is a similar. The question you're raising is a similar thing. But it seems to me that we should first, and again, some of my fellow Christians don't like this, we should first of all try to be honest as historians and say, this is what we think happened. I don't want to lead with my theology, because my theology has been fallible. My theology in the past, parts of it I think I've falsified. So I don't want to lead with that. I want to lead with history. Now, you can object history is also hypothetical, and you can be wrong about things, and I've been wrong about things. But for whatever reason, this is my habit. I want to start with history and then figure out what we do with theology. And I can do that because there are many things about the Christian tradition and Christian people that I'm very happy and comfortable with, and it worked for me. But if that's not the case, then you're just going to say this is, another millenarian messianic movement with a failed prophet, just one that happened to catch on.
That's why the question, even when I tell it as an outsider of the faith, it almost feels wrong to ask it that bluntly, because a failed prophet, false prophet, because it's like, look at the success the religion did have. And even if it's like, it should be worded wrong, worded differently, I mean, and it seems like you could see, well, how failed is he? Because, it's literally the most, so you could see how I could see like a critique of that comment. And I guess the just getting to the brass tacks of what I think is implied is that you look at them and there's prophets who are making predictions, and we have examples where even like the little God's eye view omniscient narrator telling us when God would send a lying spirit or whatever, these kind of things in the Old Testament. Someone might, look at this and go, well, Jesus made prophecies and he was wrong about them, and they're rigid in their approach. And they think, reading that at face value, you could see why they might draw the conclusion, well, this would make him that false prophet.
Of course. And that's also why conservatives or many evangelicals don't like me, right?
Right.
Because they are starting from the same place as the skeptic, actually. They're starting from the same place, which is, if this happened, then everything is falsified, right? I just don't start there. That's not what I do. I don't have a theological system that I inherited from Calvin or Augustine or somebody like that. My mind is a free-for-all with different points of view, always doing battle. I can't do better than that. I haven't come up with a way of mapping everything or figuring everything out.
That you're actually calling me out here, because part of me in my years on Myth Vision is the chip on my shoulder has been, I'm actually kind of reacting to the very thing I came out of. We weren't professional cherry pickers here. The kind of liberal Christianity that actually goes, hey, look, I don't need every jot and tittle. It's not inerrant. It's not infallible. There's a lot there that I take, and there's a lot there that I don't take. And I really wish that was the kind of Christianity I would have been raised in. Mm-hmm. I would have had a less axe to grind kind of perception when it comes to what I do today. And I think I am getting better over time as you kind of get away from what I would say are toxic forms of viewing any kind of religion, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. Are you prepared for question 2?
Oh, that was all question 1. Okay, question 2. Okay.
Yeah, it's still in the vein of eschatology, but it's more zeroing in on an example. So I say you mentioned the debate over Mark 13:32, where Jesus says, not even the Son knows the day or hour. Scholars, and this is an interesting part of the question, I had an article sent to me by John J. Collins. I know he's not a New Testament scholar, but he was writing in the relevant area of Mark, and he suggested that he thought this verse might be a later Markan insertion, or the church, if you will, is putting this in the mouth of Jesus to excuse the delay of the parousia. If Jesus actually held a contingent eschatology where he knew the end depended on repentance, why would he express ignorance about the timing? Doesn't the theory of contingency conflict with the tradition of ignorance? Or if Mark 13:32 is a later church creation to deal with the delay, does that not undermine the idea that Jesus himself had a theology of delay before he died?
Okay, so first of all, do you remember what John sent this to you?
You know what's funny? You're asking me. I have it in an email. It's not public.
Adela. It's not Adela. I mean, she's worked on Mark. She's written a commentary. This is John. It's something he's written recently.
He wrote it and gave it to me 2 years ago, but he said he hadn't published it yet.
Okay,
and I could send it to you if you'd like. I can forward you the article. Oh snap! AKSFL 440. What a heck of a name! Just became a member. Thank you so much. We have a new member on Myth Vision. Thanks for joining. Hey, make sure you go check out some of the videos that you get to see as a member of the channel, and also kick ass with that symbol next to your name in the chat. People get to see that symbol. You're especially recognized now. I really appreciate you joining. But again, make sure you go watch some of the videos that I haven't released to the public. This is one, for example. We have several that have not been out there just for being a member. Thanks so much for joining.
Ask his permission first.
Of course.
Look, in one of my earlier books, Constructing Jesus, I argued that one of our problems is that human beings are not Vulcans, and we all are inconsistent. And I do not think Jesus was a philosopher. I think he was a charismatic prophet who exhorted people, and he said what he needed to do in the right context, and he spoke differently to different people at different times. So I'd have to think about this for a bit. Is it possible to harmonize ignorance with contingent eschatology or something else? I don't know. But I've never taken a stand on the historicity of that verse. And it's very interesting because you see, when you look at the secondary literature, you see at least 2 arguments one for, one against. The for argument is, why would the church ever have concocted a statement in which Jesus professed ignorance? All right. Now, that's an interesting argument. If you look at the church fathers, they hate this verse. They can't take it literally. They come up with all sorts of rationalizations because it makes no sense that the Son doesn't know when he's coming back.
Oh, heck no. The mother Wendyberg just gifted 10 memberships. 10 people just got blessed. 10 people
just got access to all the videos that are not public. Wendy, you are awesome. Look, Ab Initio Africa is also a member now. Look, all these people getting saved with the real gospel. No, seriously, thank you so much for becoming a member. Thank you, Wendy. 10 memberships gifted. I'm curious to know who's a member now. I love when I see that, I always go, who got it? Who ended up receiving that free membership? So if you got it, let me know. I'm curious in the chat. Seriously, love you. Thank you so much for that. It means the world. Let's keep going. Let's keep rocking. And thank you again, Ab. Really appreciate the member, becoming a new member here. I'm out here doing the Lord's work. Hallelujah. Remember now, if I can hit my super chat goal, I don't know if that's possible, but if we hit my super chat goal, I am going to be speaking in tongues at the end of this, and everyone's getting super duper gifted. But you also can clip how ridiculous I'm going to sound. I'm going to go all out. Here we go.
Right? Okay, this doesn't make any sense. But the argument against this is that there are very few places where Jesus speaks of himself as the Son in an absolute way, if you leave aside the Gospel of John. And doesn't this make you think that the early Christians who are so big on Jesus as Son of God have formulated this statement? So both of them make some sense. That's one of the problems of doing history. You actually have a good argument over here, and then you got a good argument over here. And so somebody like me just says, well, I don't know exactly. But if you're also going to follow me and you're going to think in terms of phases or possible stages, then maybe there's some way of putting those things together because they come from different points. But I think that's all I want to say because I haven't read John's article, and I've never really thought much about this. I've just thought, I don't know where this verse comes from, and I've just sort of left it aside.
Yeah, and it's interesting coming from John and not his wonderful wife. And I enjoyed it because most of the article is actually critiquing N.T. Wright's view. So
I'd really like to see this.
Yeah, it's kind of, he has that kind of realized eschatology approach where he's trying to kind of deal with these issues. And I thought to myself, it does make a lot of sense why an author, a later evangelist, or the church, or whoever is writing Mark, would put this in Jesus' mouth. But it also could still get in line with my next question we're going to get into on Matthew 10, which you'll famously have always addressed. This could potentially be layered, like you said. That one explanation, and there's no way to prove it, is that there's a memory of him actually making predictions, temple stuff maybe, and it's not all just at Vaticanium ex eventu, but there may be something to his belief that something would happen. And then someone's inserting when the finality didn't actually conclude. Hey, these are signs, but the end isn't yet, and I don't know the day or hour, to get the failure, if you will, of these expectations to kind of soften the blow. And I kind of wonder. I mean, there's so many ways to look at it. So
so my own view, though, is with regard at least to Mark 13 and Matthew 24, that they are still hoping for a near end.
Right.
And they haven't got to the point that the Gospel of John has gotten to, where at the very end, whoever added chapter 21 says, well, Jesus really didn't say that he would come before everybody died or before this disciple would die. He didn't really say that. I think Mark and Matthew still expect a close conjunction between the end of the world, or the end of history as we know it, and the end of the temple, or the end of Jerusalem. I don't see how to separate them in those two works. And I also disagree with Tom Wright in that I don't see Mark 13 as a sort of realized prophecy where the Son of Man came on the clouds of heaven in AD 70. I'm in a different camp on that.
Yeah.
He's sure I'm wrong. I'm sure he's wrong. So just another reason maybe
Allison's right. Allison's right.
Did you? I think I told you I was part of full preterism at one point in my past.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir. I believed Wright didn't go far enough, even though he had, because what we did, remember, we're fundamentalists. All of us are very much literalists. Jesus said it was going to happen soon. We realized it was going to happen soon. And so it can't be wrong. So when you have these presuppositions that a person who makes a statement that you believe is God in the flesh, part of the Trinity, the whole nine, can't be mistaken here. We didn't try to rationalize that in the hypostatic union, his human side made mistake. No. He made a lot of statements. The New Testament's loaded with time statements that indicate a nearness and a soon expectation. It is the last hour. Apocalypse of John. Write these things down, for the time is at hand. They're near. It's about to happen. We then drew a logical conclusion that if he can't be wrong, right? You could get a syllogism here. You could picture one.
Yeah, I got you.
Where it happened, but it didn't happen the way we think it happened, and therefore we would find passages where Yahweh split the mountains and they melted like wax and all of that. And we went, well, that's apocalyptic metaphorical language. And then when you start running with that metaphor this, metaphor that, I kid you not, I'm not exaggerating or strawmanning many of the full preterists that are in the groups. But when you get to places like there will be no more death, no more tears in the Apocalypse of John, death does not mean death. Tears does not mean tears. Words stop meaning words is what happens. And you have to have a decoder, so to speak, to understand these issues because you have problems. You're trying to cognitive dissonance. I think sets in your reinterpreting stuff. So
yeah. So I do think that the issue of symbolism versus literalism is very complex and very difficult. And there are lots of passages which are clearly symbolic, and there are others that I think are clearly literal. And then there are things that are in between and that you can debate. But I like to back up and ask the question, what is the purpose of eschatology in the first place? What is going on in 4th Baruch? What is going on in 2nd Baruch? What's going on in 2nd Isaiah? What's going on in 1st Enoch? I think that they all have to do with the problem of evil, and whatever they're looking for will solve the problem of evil. And the problem with the preterist point of view is that Jerusalem fell, and the Romans are still in charge, and the world's still a mess, and it hasn't been fixed. You may have these little groups of Christians who have, feel that they have a new life, but that's not what apocalyptic, in my judgment, is about. It's about death. It's about judgment. It's about really changing things. There's an old tale, I think it's in Martin Buber's Tales of the Hasidim, about an old rabbi who's sitting at his desk and the window is open, and a disciple or two, they come to the window and they're all excited and they say, Messiah has come, Messiah has come, he's here, he's here. And the rabbi then gets up and he goes to the window and he just sniffs. He goes, and then he says, Messiah has not come. And then he goes back to his desk. And the presupposition of this story is, if Messiah comes, everything will be changed. Everything will be different. We're not going to have to wonder, has the Messiah come? If the Messiah has come, everything, it'll just be obvious, right? And so what happens in AD 70 it doesn't lead to an obvious solution to the problem of evil. There's also a ethical question or problem that I have, which is off to the side, apart from exegesis. But so if you ask what happened in AD 70, you could say, well, the temple fell. Okay, that's an abstraction. What did the Romans do? They raped women.
Yeah.
They raped lots of women. They crucified lots of people, lots of men. They sold children into slavery. I don't know how to look at that theologically and say, oh, that's the victory of Christ or that's the victory of God. That's humanity at its worst. That's as bad as it can get. And I don't understand how that's a victory or vindication in any way of God or Jesus. It doesn't make sense to me. Now, that's apart from exegesis, but you see my point here. Is this really what Jesus was looking forward to? Does this really vindicate him in some way? It's another nightmare.
I share your perception here 100%. And in fact, I think that, and I don't even think they mean to do this. I've been around the circles of, you call them preterists, I just say preterists, but same thing. I've been around the circles for a long time, and I've had this lingering kind of feeling that some of this leads toward anti-Semitism in many ways. It's God's done with his people, right? It's 2.0. Like, we have the authentic faith. He's done with the people that he promised all these physical realities to throughout Scripture. And when I say Scripture, I mean Hebrew Bible, I mean Septuagint, I mean what Christians call the Old Testament. And of course, much of that does get spiritualized in the New, but all of that just gets completely erased and divorced, and it gets celebrated as the day of the resurrection in full preterism. So it's not just the day of judgment, it's also the day of resurrection. And when I've asked many of these people, I'm sorry, we're off the tangent of my questions, but it's relevant. I asked many of the leading speakers of this, I say, you keep talking about the resurrection as a corporate spiritual thing, not any real manifestation. How is it that the final judgment manifests historically with the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, 50%? Let's say it's 50-50 here to get an idea of a coin. We can see it. It observes and manifests. Where is that observation for the resurrection? And some of them have, try to say, well, they celebrated, they were in their houses in joy because they were now, they had been redeemed in some way. There's something spiritual that happened. Someone might have been dancing in the streets.
Oh, snap. Oh, snap. The mother Wendyberg is back again with a 20 bomb super chat. Wendy, I'm about to start speaking in tongues before we get our goal. I mean, preacher used to tell us Jesus is coming soon. And I'm thinking, soon? It's been over 2,000 years. That has to be the longest soon I've ever heard of. Hey, really, really appreciate it, Wendy. Thank you so much for the big super chat. I really, really appreciate you. I agree with you. I would imagine the Connecticut Prince in the chat would disagree. Sounds like he has some really different way of looking at all of history. Again, the Claude that I brought up will probably just say, no, it hasn't been really 2,000 years. Notice now they got to change history to make it, make it work. Really appreciate it, Wendy. Seriously. Yeah. So I would be definitely looking forward to more evidence, Connecticut. That's what I would say. I've heard of this flamenco stuff. I did an interview a long time ago with a guy who brought it up. It just sounds like a really odd kind of conspiracy theory, but you'd have to really, show some sources, because we have pretty much a massive consensus on how history seems to have worked out. And you're trying to overturn all of history to what? Save the New Testament, to save the
book of Revelation? I don't really get it. Wendy, love you. Thank you for the super chat. I'm going to continue playing with it up.
They might call it different things like that. And I'm like, a lot of these.
Oh, if you super chat, you kick Wendy's super chat off, and then I'll take your super chat or your question, whatever. So, really appreciate it. Oh, snap. We got a member in the house for 41 months. The Deadly Dan is dropping by and saying, I still say it's all a Roman legend from Greece. Dan, thanks so much for being a member, man, and dropping in your words here. Wendy, I'm keeping you up, though, as a super until someone else super chats. Thank you again.
Christians who are Jews, their family members are in the Jerusalem temple, are in Jerusalem when it's being raised and all these things are happening. So how do you rationalize between my family member over here is going through words that are unspeakable to I'm celebrating because I have received this resurrection that's been promised? And the explanation they have, they try to really make sense of it. And they try to act like, well, both can be true at the same time. And I don't see how that's possible. I just don't see how that makes sense. And they do it because they're forced to have to explain it with their systematic theology, as you know. Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to disagree.
Well, question number 3, then. You discuss Albert Schweitzer's famous use of Matthew 10:23. You will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. You suggest that this verse might actually preserve a memory of a specific failed hope of Jesus, that he and his disciples expected the end to come during that specific mission, and it didn't. If Jesus experienced such a stark falsification of his own prediction during his ministry, why did he continue to preach imminent judgment rather than changing his message entirely? Does this specific failure suggest his contingency theology wasn't working even for him in real time? Doesn't this passage seem to imply that something that would happen, not contingent on Israel's repentance or the disciples even having preached repentance to all of Israel? I hope that last part makes sense. Like, this seems like more determinative. Like, you will not have gone through. Like, he's making a bold statement, not, hey, okay, please, yeah.
Well, so one of the things I do in the first chapter of that book is look at how many places in the Hebrew Bible, and then later on, you get statements of contingency. And I think that, for example, in the book of Jonah, contingency is assumed because Jonah says 40 days and Nineveh will be destroyed. That's it. There's no qualification. That's it. And it's not. And nobody says, well, he was a failed prophet, right? Nobody says that because circumstances changed. So I think that ancient Jews are more readily able to think like that. But here's the more important thing, I think. So when we think about a millenarian or messianic movement and think about a prophecy that hasn't come to pass, as outsiders, we're all, oh my gosh, how can any of them continue? What's wrong with these people? But that is to have a sort of narrow theological focus because Jesus has a group around him and they've bonded socially and they believe that they've seen miracles. They believe they've seen all sorts of incredible things. And people who are healed, or have members of their household healed, they're ecstatic. So as Jesus is looking around, he's also a successful exorcist, according to the Gospels, however you want to understand exorcism. It looks like he was pretty good at it, right? So he's looking at all this other stuff, not just this prophecy. He has to think that this is the right movement. This is on the right track. God is with us. So the problem would be with the prophecy, not with the movement. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that is why any prophetic movement that survives a falsified prophecy continues, because that's only one element of a much larger reality. And in fact, if you look at the sociologists, what they'll tell you about new religious movements is that frequently the theology is really not what's pulling them together, even though that's what they often talk about. It's the surrogate family, it's the social bonding, it's the religious experiences and ecstasies they have, and so on. And if those are sufficient, the group is going to continue. And then a prophecy that hasn't come to pass is going to be a problem to be solved or an idea to be interpreted, but it's not going to disrail the whole thing. It's not, and it obviously didn't happen with early Christianity. Early Christianity has lots of people who think the end is near, but it survived. Why? Because that wasn't the only thing there. The way I think about it is that maybe proclamation of a near end and coming judgment and resurrection was sort of the ideological.
Yo, got a super duper. Ab Initio Africa, thank you so much for the super chat. Nothing symbolic in a cop-out. Address dechronology. I don't know what dechronology is. Huh. Interesting. I don't know what dechronology is. Very, very weird. Symbolic in a cop-out. Address D. I'm not sure what you're getting at, Ab. I wish I knew more. If you comment some more here, you could help me out. Again, I'll wait for your comment real quick. I want to address Mr. Pink here real quick. Well, you're keeping the Wendy Berg post up. She's a big fan, a big Amen fan, and you are not. That's the irony. I don't get what the irony is, other than the fact that he tells his members I'm part of the brothel that makes money when Danny Jones makes 100 times more than I do in a year.
and he helps Danny to make money. So I don't understand the big irony there. By the way, I personally know Wendy. Like we speak on the phone on a regular. So whether or not she enjoys and gets entertainment out of watching Ammon or not doesn't matter. I think he's total Looney Tunes. I think he's completely lost it. And I don't think he's right when he comes to his conclusions on Mark 14 and many other issues. I just think he looks for such weird conspiracy level type conclusions on so many things that I would totally disagree with, but who am I? I mean, you can go watch whoever you want. The real question is, and I wonder what the irony is why are you in the chat if you're so much of an Ammonite fan? You know I'm not. Like, what do I provide that you want to be here for? So I'm just curious, because now I'm reminded, Wendy says I'm not an Ammon fan at all. Look, I'm just bringing it out here, airing out the drama, Mr. Pink. So I guess Wendy's wrong about Wendy's position. But either way, I just want to know, like, look, if someone's a fan of Ammon stuff, so what? I have my opinion. Who gives a shit, right? You don't need to follow me. I'm not the cult leader that tells you these people, you don't go watch, don't go listen. No, I'm going to tell you what I think about it. You can watch Ammon. I don't care. That's none of my business. I'm not here to tell you not to watch him. I would simply say, with a grain of salt, there's a reason why the consensus is looking at it going, hell no, this guy's conclusion's wrong. And other reasons, I have personal reasons why I'm like, no, thank you. Not into this dude. You know what I mean? But I would just say, if you're an Ammonite, you're over here watching me and you're like stirring up trouble or complaining and bitching and saying someone's got, it's irony that you're showing a post to someone who's a fan of Ammon. Why are you here with me? Do you like me? I mean, what are you doing? Are you watching me because you enjoy my content? Who knows? Anyway, Kay, what's up? Good to see you in the chat. Thanks for joining in. I just figured I'd address that real quick here, and I didn't get a response by Ab. I was hoping to get a response, man. I don't know what to do here. I do have a Discord. And it's the same red eyeball with the MVP in it and Myth Vision. It's called Myth Vision Podcast, and it's on Discord. So I could put the link in there, but I don't know how to do that right now. Anyway, let's continue with the video.
Beginning, but as soon as you have this movement, all sorts of other things are happening, and that's not the only thing going on.
Oh, snap. As soon as I hit play, Joe came in with an altar call just now. He said, come here. I want the gospel of Myth Vision. Look, no, seriously, Joe, thanks for becoming a member. There's like 15, 20 videos that I've worked really hard, put them on the membership thing. So be sure you go and watch those videos that I put up there. It's just an incentive to help keep the lights on so that we can keep doing what we're doing, bringing education to the world. I really appreciate you being part of the family, Joe. And is that, man, I almost thought you were from The Sopranos. I'm looking at your picture here, and it looks like for a moment, I'm like, hold on, is that one of the characters off The Sopranos? Thank you, man, for real. Appreciate it. The gifted membership here. Okay, we found one of the people who got gifted. And then Ab says, okay, the Horus, Isis, Osiris, Zeus, Hercules, Odin, and Thor. Jesus is not so special as historical evidence. That is if he existed. So it sounds like you're actually saying you don't think Jesus existed. My God, that's a whole nother video getting into the weeds of this. But many historical figures also adopted, much of the mythical figure material. Like a lot of the Caesars, are painted to look like Romulus or painted to look like Dionysus, and real figures actually imitated mythical ones all the time. So it's really hard to just simply distinguish and go, well, we have these gods and Jesus also looks like and acts like these gods. I'm just making a simplified version, but I will be doing a video that gets into this in depth in a live stream. You have a lot of real people who actually imitate the gods that never existed. For example, some of the Caesars, I know, what is his name? The runner-up against Julius Caesar. He ended up with Cleopatra after Julius Caesar died. My brain is shot. It's been almost 3 hours. Trying to think here. Help me out, chat. Anyone who knows Roman history, who's the guy who ended up with Cleopatra after Caesar? And he was one of Caesar's buddies. He ended up imitating Dionysus literally off the shore of Ephesus. They approached the shore and they had a procession. Mark Anthony, thank you. My God, I love you for that. And you know what's so funny? I'm reading right now Where's the book? So it's same author as this here, Augustus. Let me go full screen for just a second here. The author here, Adrian Goldsworthy. He's a classicist. Augustus, first emperor of Rome, but I'm actually listening to the audio version of Caesar, Julius Caesar, and I'm about to interview him in a few days on Julius Caesar's life, and he goes over Mark Antony, and I just had his in my mind, and I forgot. Anyway, stay tuned for that. That's going to be a brilliant conversation. It's an exhaustive story, but Mark Antony, for those who don't know, when he got with Cleopatra, they had a procession in Ephesus off the coast. They pulled up in the boat. He gets off the ship, similar to like if you go read the hymn to Dionysus, you know, he's caught by a bunch of pirates and whatnot on the ship, transforms the ship into a vineyard and all that. Well, here in this case, Mark Antony and Cleopatra board the coast of Ephesus. They walk onto the land in a procession with people dressed up like satyrs and maenads, and they have a Dionysian Isis procession. Cleopatra is Isis incarnate. Mark Antony is Dionysus incarnate. That doesn't mean Mark Antony didn't exist, because he literally has mythology of him cloaked to look like Dionysus. And same with Isis for Cleopatra. So it muddies the water, right, when you get to Jesus. And this is not to make a case either way, whether he existed or not. But you can't just go, well, he looks like this and acts like this, therefore he didn't exist. A lot of figures did cloak themselves in real myths that didn't exist, right? So it's a complicated issue. You have to go into different details and different evidences to try and make the case on why you think there probably wasn't or probably was a historical Jesus. Just figure I'd get that. And by the way, Mr. Pink, I saw your comment. No hard feelings here, man. I'm like, look, I just don't want to, honestly, I don't want to keep going. I heard some recent stuff about someone trying to target him and doing something with his live stream. And I don't wish that on anybody, period. And so I don't want any problems. But again, anyone who's coming over from either side, they're welcome. I just don't want to create any more issues. And I want to be honest about what I think. I think he's wrong when it comes to Amen. But so keeping it real. Brain went blank. You had to Google it. Yeah, I thought so too. That's my brain. Look, it's been 2 hours, 34 minutes. I'm like, I'm not used to doing long streams, and I'm doing this tomorrow, same time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the day after tomorrow, the day after that, the day after. I've got streams set up for every day this week. So I hope that you'll put me on the calendar and be ready for these live streams. We're going to kick some butt. We are going to kick some butt. I got stuff coming. Anyway, so let's keep going.
And people are, at least on an unconscious level, sort of going to weigh these things out. Well, I've got all these good things. We can figure out what to do with this, this prophecy which hasn't come to pass, but I'm not going to let go of all this other.
What are the odds that Jesus existed? Oh, Ab said I'll be here. What are the odds that Jesus existed? Just to address your question, because you did super chat me here. I personally think there's more a chance there was probably a guy, but I honestly have no way of gauging it. If you really, really held me down and said, make your mind up, I'd just be like, dude, I think there was probably a dude. I'm agnostic ultimately. Like, don't make me have to be certain about anything. But I think there probably was an apocalyptic dude who got mythologized. And there's books back here, but I'm not going to waste my time. Here we go. Thanks for the super chat, though, Ab.
Stuff.
Makes a lot of sense. Oh, yeah. You can even bring cognitive dissonance into it, to try and explain how they could rationalize that in light of all of the other aspects you just brought in. And it's like, we're not giving this up. They might even double down. And there's examples of that. I was thinking of the other prophecy of Tyre when you answered me with Job, the Tyre prophecy by Ezekiel, and how within the Bible, he's saying that you're going to be utterly desolate, uninhabitable forever. Like these really bold claims prophetically.
Hey, Mr. Pink, I don't think numbers do reflect truth. Christianity, number one religion on the earth in terms of population. Again, I don't think truth gets numbers, just being honest. I think sometimes truth doesn't get numbers. Sometimes it's harder to swallow those pills,
Because they're supposedly, and I don't know how Ezekiel would know this, Tyre celebrating their being taken out of captivity from Babylon, taken into Babylon. And so he's like, oh, you're going to get wiped off the map. And for 13 years, Babylon attempted to do so, and Tyre proper never was captured. And then 3 chapters later, literally Ezekiel says, well, and this is God speaking through Ezekiel, of course, in the text. And he's like, look, I know that you scratch your heads bald trying to make it happen and getting Tyre, but I'm going to give you Egypt instead. So like he's already updating the Feld expectations here before, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can also see that at the end of the book of Daniel, where you have such and such is going to happen in so many days, and then you get right under it, well, it's going to be this many days, right? And it looks like the original prophecy didn't come to pass, and then the second one didn't come to pass. But the amazing thing is that they keep the text anyway. So the text has become valuable for itself. They like the whole text, and they can live with, rationalize, or reinterpret the parts that that don't fit. I remember reading an article, I don't remember the author, a number of years ago, which was on prophecies of the near end in Islam and how they get preserved in the sources. They don't get forgotten. They don't get thrown away. For some reason, once they enter and have a certain context, they're just kept, even if it looks like they weren't falsified. So again, the point is, when you're talking about religion or religious movements, especially enthusiastic movements like early Christianity, they have tongue speaking, they have prophets, they have healings and all this. There's a lot more going on than just, okay, A is going to be right around the corner. There are lots of other things. And that means they had the resources to live with whatever dissonance they had. And by the way, the dissonance, cognitive dissonance, is going to be greater on the part of outsiders than insiders, almost certainly. Right?
Wow.
The outsiders they don't have any sympathy, but the insiders are going to want to think differently. And, if you look at the Gospel of John or the Gospel of Thomas, I think these people are quite confident in reinterpreting the eschatological tradition. I think what they're doing is reinterpreting it, but they're convinced they're giving a right or fair reading of it.
Yeah, there's so much there that we could get into about cognitive dissonance, and I love that stuff. So I shift subject topics from the apocalyptic, expectations to your chapter 2.
This is the juicy stuff.
Typology, and I love this section.
This is my favorite personally. I mean, we've been doing apocalypse stuff, but this is my favorite topic, what we're about to deal with in this interview. It's typology. You'll see as we unravel, but this personally is my favorite, and the book, of course, we're addressing. So
enacted behavior or literary construction. That's how I've subtitled this section. So my question number 4, which leads us into this, is in chapter 2, you argue that Jesus intentionally enacted the role of a new Moses. You lean heavily on the example of Simeon's Stylites, who consciously imitated Moses' 40-day fast on a mountain to show that this is a historical behavior, not just a literary trope. However, you also acknowledge that the Gospels portray Jesus as imitating Elijah, Elisha, and even perhaps David, Joshua, Isaiah, Jonah, Job, Isaac, the sacrificed son, Daniel, son of man, which may not be you specifically, but there's other scholars who think that, many other prophets, and even Joseph, which isn't as common. So you write that typological thinking is not mathematical reasoning. A can be B, and at the same time C. Here's my concern in the question. If Jesus is imitating everyone, Moses, Elijah, Elisha, David, at what point does the historical Jesus disappear behind a wall of literary illusions, David Friedrich Strauss, if you will? Is it historically probable that a real Galilean peasant tried to live out the biographies of all 4 or 5 different scriptural figures simultaneously? Or is it more likely that highly literate scribes, the evangelists, simply wrapped him in every available scriptural flag to legitimize him?
There's no or. It's both. So with the Moses stuff, I just argue that, I tried to argue that it's prevalent. It's in bunches of sayings, it's in all the strata, and it's in a bunch of stories. And I also don't see it as something that the evangelists are emphasizing, okay? Matthew has a typology, but he's not rewriting the sayings to get it. And there's a typology in Mark, but it's not what he's all about at all. And I don't think this is Luke's agenda to any great extent. And John actually doesn't like it. He wants Jesus and Moses to be, I think, antithetical figures. So my sense of the whole is that this thing is at the beginning of the tradition, and it gets turned in, it grows in Matthew in certain respects, right? I do not see the same thing with David. I think the David typology in the Passion narrative, especially Matthew and Mark, is mostly a literary creation. And I don't think Jesus went around thinking, I'm Elisha. I think those signals are mostly or entirely from the tradition. Elijah, I'm not sure. My tendency is to think the Gospels may be right. And Jesus thought of that as being largely John the Baptist's office, if you will. But my point is, if you don't think that, you can be more than one thing. And Simeon Stylites is, in fact, Moses and Elijah in his own mind. And I try to demonstrate this by looking at the sources. And
so I don't know if you caught that. For those who are viewing, just to make it double clear, is in his book, he really dies on the hill that Jesus acted like Moses in real life, right? So when you're reading a story that sounds like Moses, whether he's in the wilderness for 40 days, which imitates the Exodus with the children of Israel in the wilderness for 40 years, and being tempted with 3 temptations, of course, which I think is literary. He does too, but
like he thinks a real Jesus was running around thinking he was a real Moses. And you could read Josephus, where you have the signs prophets that act like Moses, they act like Joshua, they act like these other figures. But then I brought in a criticism and said, okay, so hold on, that may be true, and I'm not denying that that could be the case, but the Gospels also depict Jesus like Joseph, Jesus like David, Jesus like Elijah and Elisha, Jesus like Isaiah, Jesus like the Son of Man, which is in Daniel. I mean, when do you draw the line and realize that whoever wrote the Gospels are making up stories using Scripture to dress Jesus up as all these characters throughout their sacred texts? And so why think he really was doing these things, or there's some memory of him actually behaving this way, instead of thinking this may be a literary fiction? And he thinks that Jesus really was running around thinking he was like a new lawgiver, like a Moses who was doing miracles and stuff. And but he just said he doesn't think that Jesus thought he was maybe Elijah, but then he turned around and said Simon Stylites did think he was Elijah and Moses. And so I'm pressing him on this because this is one of the crux of the issues I engage on this channel all the time. Are these stories we're reading about Jesus really based on something that may have been a memory that really did kind of happen? Or is it thoroughly fictional, in some way made up by an author, and we'll never know behind it if there's an episode that's based on a memory or not? And that's my challenge. I don't think we can know. I don't think we can be confident for sure on any episode, including crucifixions, the crucifixion stories on that time at Passover. We cannot be confident that it happened at that time. Did Jesus get crucified? Maybe. I would say probably. I don't think Jews stoned him to death. I would imagine he probably got crucified. But like, we're reading, this is so complicated. So I just wanted to press Allison on this to get his view. And now he's defending this idea that he thinks, well, real people were imitating these characters like Moses and Joshua and Elijah and stuff. But he's going to say it, and he's already said it, I think, a little, but he's going to continue. I think a lot of this is fiction. And I'm going, how can you be too confident on what is fiction and what isn't? I don't know. Maybe he has a more awareness of all the broader literature, and his mind somehow tells him he thinks there's more confidence in this real Jesus doing real things that look like Moses. But then you have to ask, why don't we say he really imitated David, or why? Well, that's fictional, you know? Let's continue.
Maybe the most important thing of this chapter is the demonstration. It has to be a demonstration that typology is not purely a literary thing, because I give examples. Martin Luther King Jr. really did think he was Moses. He really did. I mean, it's not a typology. It's in his own speeches, right? He's been to the mountaintop. He's seen the promised land. He's not going to get there, he's Moses on Mount Pisgah. That's him. And, he starts off the 1963 speech alluding to Lincoln. He's Lincoln. He's not somebody saying he's like Lincoln. He is Lincoln. He's continuing the cause of Lincoln, which was freeing the slaves. And he is the leader. He's the big guy. He's like Lincoln. And there's this wonderful passage I quote in there from Gregory Nazianzen, who talks about himself as being, going into the cave and the back of God in the darkness and all. He's riffing off Moses, and this is a first person account. It's me. I'm having the experience of Moses. So, and then the Simeon stuff, I think it's overwhelming that this guy sought to be like Moses and also like Elijah. And by the way, in the Bible, Elijah is imitating Moses. Now I don't know anything about the historical Elijah, so I'm just going to be ignorant and say, if there was an historical Elijah, maybe he knew some Mosaic traditions and was trying to pattern himself after him, or maybe it's totally literary. I don't know. I just have no idea.
Hey,
but I think
that though, imagine what critical Old Testament scholars might say about the overlap between Moses and Joshua and Elijah and Elisha. And let's suppose they say, hey, this is literarily invented. If they can literarily invent Elijah and Elisha, there was no, say, historical Elijah and Elisha, but they modeled this literary after the literary characters of Moses and Joshua. Why would we not at least take serious that Jesus could be a literary invention in this regard? That's one of the mythicist models, if there is one, that at least should be on the table. Even if you're not persuaded of it, should be on the table. You don't even have to be a mythicist to see what I'm saying, though. I lean there was a guy. But like, my point is
I get that people imitated and believed in their heads they were these things, and maybe Jesus did. But why is it not as likely that they invented the story about him and that he didn't really do those things or something like that? You know what I'm saying? Like, he just granted it by saying Elijah and Elisha might be literary, that he may not have actually imitated Moses. It just sounds like, I don't know. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm saying, why are we so confident or making cases that, yeah, I think Jesus did this, instead of being more cautious and saying, this is one possibility, but who knows? Be more agnostic.
I think the best bet with Jesus is that this is him and not just his promoters.
Oh, snap, 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 snap. We got that Wendy, the mother Wendy Bird. Thank you so much for the super chat, Wendy. Every myth, legend, fairy tale has a grain of truth. It is up to us to find that truth. Well said. I think there is. I mean, look, truth can be defined differently too. So sometimes you mean facts. Sometimes you mean, truth. Truth can mean fact. Truth can also be esoteric and something else, gives meaning. But yeah, I think there is truth in all these stories in some way. We can get. But yeah, I really enjoy learning about all of this stuff. You know what I mean? Let me continue.
One of the reasons for thinking this is that Josephus talks about popular prophets in his day, and they are like Moses or like Joshua. That's who they are. That's their identity. There was the Egyptian who led the people out in the desert, and they wandered around. Same verb as in Exodus for the wandering of the children of Israel.
You know what I wish we had? Listen, I was leading him to this because his book does it. I love Dale Allison, okay? This is not a hit. I love Dale Allison. But I'll tell you, his book leads this path. And I'm smirking in the video. You can see my face kind of like, yep, you're coming right where I want you to go. Because Dale has an interesting point here. And I wish we had more data from an outsider, a historian like Josephus, let's say. If he can write about Theudas, if he can write about Judas the Galilean, if he could write about the Egyptian and all of these failed sign prophets, these Moses, Joshua wannabes, okay, then you would expect, I would think, if he knows about those guys doing these things, and we have the gospel material describing Jesus in the wilderness with a crowd of people, feeding people, claiming to feeding 5,000, claiming to do all these things. Josephus doesn't tell us any of that about Jesus. All we get is that he was a guy who was believed to be the Messiah. He gets crucified and killed. He taught many Gentiles. He did miracles, and that's it. So if there's a memory in Josephus, and we don't grant that passage of the testimonium is fully interpolated, and we say there's a memory here, what was Jesus remembered for? Claiming to be the Messiah, got crucified, and he did miracles? According to Josephus, he did miracles. That's it. He doesn't mention him in the wilderness like he does with the other guys who take a whole group of people into the wilderness. He doesn't mention him as like the Egyptian taking them to Mount Gerizim to try and, break down the walls to get the tablets of Moses. Like, there's so many sign prophets that I wish we had more data for Jesus that indicated he was really out here in the wilderness doing this stuff, or really tried to split the Jordan River, or whatever Theudas tried to do. We don't get that. We just get miracles in general. That sucks for me as someone who wants to get back there in the history, because if Josephus would have known and wrote about this guy, what else would he have really had said if Jesus really did these things? I don't know. It's an argument from absence, but it sucks because we don't have living documentation other than Josephus for Theudas. We don't have living documentation for the Egyptian. We don't have it for Judas the Galilean, apart from maybe a mention in Philo, but definitely by the historians like Josephus. And they document like details, historical details. He was mad about the taxes that were being put on the people. And by the way, Judas the Galilean wasn't even from the place that's being taxed here. He's up from the north. So he's coming down south to cause this kind of revolt with the temple and all and the taxes. We don't have data that we wish we did for Jesus. And he's comparing Jesus to these guys. So I want you to see the argument that's happening here. Think about what's happening. Jesus is like these sign prophets.
that are imitating Moses and Elijah. Martin Luther King's imitating Moses, imitating Lincoln. All these people are imitating these people. All right. But all of those people fell in the sign prophets, at least within Josephus. They all fell and their movements go extinct. Why did their movements go extinct? But Jesus has stayed alive. It's all the other stuff that Allison says really motivated them to stay alive. The miracle claims, that kind of stuff. Who knows?
Josephus doesn't like these people, and he's given us negative, secondhand accounts. But it's clear these people themselves thought they were enacting typologies. So I just think this is the way a lot of these people thought. I haven't done this, but you can find early Americans who are coming over here, and sadly, North America is like the promised land, and they are going to relive the Exodus, right? And they drove out the Canaanites, so we can, do what we want with the Native Americans and so on. People really do relive narratives in their head for good and evil. Julius Caesar really wanted to be like Alexander the Great. He really did. So he's thinking, whoa, I'm going to be like. So my point is, this is not so strange. And I say in the book, I don't think I've never wanted to imitate a great religious hero, but I have wanted to imitate my dad. I've tried my best. He's a real person, and I'm a real person, and I've tried to be like him. And it's just human behavior to be like others. And sometimes people with really large religious self-conceptions want to be like other, religious heroes. I just think it's obvious. So
I agree.
Why can't Jesus be like that? I mean, we do know, now this is something that people, often don't like to think about, but we do know Jewish messiahs down through history, and they all have big self-conceptions. They all do. And I can't remember the guy, I think it's 6th century. One of the guys somewhere wanted to march through the water. Now, they all drowned, but he was trying to relive the past. Now, you look at him, you say he's a nut. Okay, fine. But the point is that he and the people around him thought they could relive the Exodus. It's not just typology.
Absolutely. I think you're hitting something here. Of course, on page 91 of the book, make sure, shameless plug, mid-interview, get the book. I promise you won't regret it, no matter what.
Why? I just have a hard time. Again, like I said, Josephus doesn't paint Theudas as actually doing the miracle, actually causing, the waters of the Jordan to split. No, he gets captured and his head cut off and stuff. So did Jesus get captured, arrested, and then killed, and then they just made up stories to make it fanciful? Was he really in the wilderness with a bunch of people trying to feed them and duplicate the miracles? Well, Allison's more open to what he calls meta-natural, and I'm not. I'm much more like, no, you're going to have to really convince me with evidence. And it goes on and on. This is a very big problem. I love this question, but it creates a problem for me because the Bible, the New Testament, is written like there's not a cautious step. It doesn't say, well, hold on. Some say that out there in the wilderness, he multiplied the fish and the loaves. No. It happened, and here's the truth. And it's written from a believer's standpoint that does not want you to be cautious. It's not writing history in any cautious way that historians wrote in the ancient world at all. They were much more cautious about these kinds of ways of writing about literature that was described like our Gospels. And there are many scholars I've had on the channel that have shown this. So let's continue. I don't want to ramble too much, but let's go.
I love your books. I'll say this for the skeptic, for the believer, for everybody. It is a safe zone for any and all people, because when you are making these arguments, Dale, you are not a dogmatist. You are making what you think convinces you, and along the way go, I mean, this seems to make the most sense to me, as you're doing right now, but you're not like, I know with certainty all of this is what I'm saying here. And I think that you're onto something here, because you brought up Julius Caesar, but Mark Antony himself, he actually lived imitating both Romulus and Dionysus. And when he finally hooked up with Queen, the queen that was married in Egypt to Julius Caesar prior.
Cleopatra?
Yes, Cleopatra. And Cleopatra actually.
I had a brain fart on this show. I couldn't get Mark Antony, but I couldn't get Cleopatra on that. This time I could get Cleopatra, but couldn't get Mark Antony.
Arrived on the coast in Ephesus and did a reenactment of a procession of the Dionysian, some festival of Dionysus. And there were satyrs and there were all sorts of people dressed up in the festival, flutes and all. The Maenads and the satyrs played along while they were in a procession being carried in a wagon of some sort or in some type of carriage. And they were imitating the actual god Isis or goddess Isis and Dionysus together on the road. A real historical reenactment of those people. So I agree with you both in the Jewish, seems like a prevalent thing in the world at large, in the Mediterranean world. So I want to do a follow-up in that, because I think this gets into more of the weeds of this issue, because I love this topic, by the way. And you point out why you don't think it's just literary, even though you will say, I think some of it is. We might get the feeding of the 5,000. I'll go down the literary path that maybe this is maybe fiction. Or look at the betrayal of Judas with Jesus and how closely that mirrors David and his Ahithophel's betrayal of David and things. Like there's literary there.
That's literary.
Yes, sir. And so I love this. I love your mind. So Dr. Allison, you discussed the temptation narrative, Jesus fasting for 40 days. You admit that you used to consider this as a Haggadic tale? Haggadic tale. So like a fiction based on Deuteronomy. But now, influenced by the example of Simeon's Stylites, you ask, might he not at some point have aspired to fast in the desert in imitation of the lawgiver? My question is, and you can see where this is headed, are we lowering the bar for history here? Just because Simeon Stylites tried to do this 400 years later in a different context, does that really increase the probability that Jesus did it? It feels like we are using a later hagiography to historicize a highly mythological story, talking to the devil in the synoptics. Why shouldn't we stick to your earlier conclusion that this is a theological fiction created by the early church?
Okay, so maybe I wasn't clear there. I think it is a theological fiction, but it could grow out of a memory that Jesus went and tried to fast like Moses or fasted in the desert for 40 days or something like that. I don't think the details are historical. I still think this is what you would call a Haggadic legend. But look, the Gospels can be really problematic. So I think there was an historical character named John the Baptist, and I think there was a real guy named Jesus, and I think John baptized Jesus. It's an historical event. But the account that we have in Mark has a divine voice and the weird dove thing, which I think is theological. So what you have here is you have a mixture of a memory of an event, which has been colored theologically by the early Christians. So that's what I'm suggesting for the temptation. Maybe Jesus spent some time in the desert trying to be like Moses. I don't know. I just asked the questions. I don't say that this has happened. And my main reason isn't Simeon. My main reason is that I see so many other Mosaic motifs and themes there. Most people think Jesus, for example, picked 12 disciples and they follow him around and, they help him do what he's supposed to be doing. The only guy to do that in the Hebrew Bible is Moses, who picks 12 people, to be around him and to help him do things. Well, look, if I think that Jesus and his audience are pious Jews and they know these stories, these famous stories about Moses and from the Pentateuch and so on, then when you pick 12 people, everybody knows what you're doing. You're not just going to look and say, well, 12, I guess it represents 12 tribes of Israel. Well, all modern scholars think that. But for me, the question is, who the heck picks 12 people to follow him around? This is it. There's nothing else like this. So I think these people were very intertextual.
Yeah, I'd be curious historically how many other characters in the sign prophet period or any period around the 1st, 2nd century BCE, 1st, 2nd century CE that had 12 disciples that, were known to have 12 disciples. And then take that as a historical question and ask and say, hey, if you don't find any, that's to me a big red flag, at least to go, well, hold on. Did they have 12? We just don't have the writings or something? Like, what do we do with that? Again, this gets into is it history or is this literary? And maybe there was a guy running around with 12 disciples, but who knows?
I think they lived in the Bible in ways that we live in our music or in our song, or in our movies or TV. Every day somebody will say something and I'll be reminded of something in a movie. And I'll say, oh, that's like whatever, right? No, I don't do that because I'm a scholar and learned. It's just the way you think. If you live in the movies, you're going to see parallels all the time and you're just going to think with them. But that doesn't mean when you think of an event with the movie in mind that you've just made up the event. Again, one of the reasons this is so tricky is because, at least for me, I think there's memory, but the memory is, if you will, mixed with, obviously, the people who tell the stories are going to tell it through their culture and their language and their religious heritage. I don't think I don't think I did this in the book. I think I've done it somewhere else. But if you know who John Bunyan was, the guy who wrote Pilgrim's Progress, once very, very famous and once the best-selling book in the English-speaking world next to the Bible. Everybody used to know who John Bunyan was. Well, if you look at his account of his conversion, it's all Paul. It's all Paul. He's pulling stuff from Paul's letters and from Acts, and he's the new Paul, right? Well, he did have a conversion experience. It is a first-hand account of something that happened, but he actually is thinking, oh, this is very much like Paul. So, there you go.
There's so much there. At the end of the day on that, it ultimately boils down to something's behind the Gospels, but we aren't really sure, but we think that Jesus might have tried to be like Moses. That's what Allison ultimately is saying, it seems. Maybe he'll be more confident on a certain episode in the Gospels over others. I don't know. But it seems like he's much more like inclined to be like, so many people imitated so many people and real people did these things. So something happened. But when he reads the Gospels, he knows there's a huge disconnect between what really happened and what the Gospels say happened. And that is where that fun spot is of
navigating, did this happen? Did this not happen? All of that.
Last, the next question, because this gets into the weeds. It's the final one in this section. Question 6. You draw parallels between Jesus and the sign prophets, which you already mentioned before.
Yeah.
So you're already a prophet predicting what I'm going to ask often. So the sign prophets mentioned by Josephus, like Theudas or the Egyptian, who tried to reenact the Exodus. These figures led people into the wilderness expecting God to act. If Jesus was consciously enacting a new Moses typology like these sign prophets, why is the outcome so different? They attempted literal reenactments, parting the Jordan, walls falling down, and were slaughtered by Rome. Jesus' enactment seems much more textual and symbolic, meaning.
By the way, just want to address not Warlight, but Solera and Ab bring up an interesting thing. You got the 12 signs of the zodiac. You got 12 as a number of the dozen months, of the year, calendar, right? Lunar calendar, common. Give me a break. Yeah. So I used to be very convinced of astrotheology and stuff. When I first started Myth Vision, I'm much more cautious on making those kind of interpretations, but you can't just, I don't think it makes a case for historicity or not historicity. I just think it leaves the door open of saying, did he really have just 12 disciples? Maybe, but I don't think you can just know that. It sucks because Lucian of Samosata said it well. How to write history. His complaint was this. He said, I had to come back to me before we continue. His complaint is this. Anyone who writes history, but mixes it in with legend, or they're writing something they want people to think happened, and they mix it in with fiction or legend or any of that, they have committed an unforgivable sin. Because, he says, later generations will be reading it and will not know what actually happened. And that's why he held Thucydides on a high place, because at least Thucydides attempted to be very clear and precise on what really happened. He didn't give you fanciful, and the heavens opened and a voice spoke and then the waters divided and he floated on the, because listen, all those fanciful stories you can find with Buddha, you can find those. Buddha walked on water. Don't believe me? Do the research. Buddha walked on water according to their text. Several figures did several miraculous things. We call these things legends, myths, fiction, and they're powerful stories. They're fun. They're cool. Gods walked on water, floated on water, split seas, all that cool stuff. And this is not just in the Jewish context. This is all over the world. The point is when you have someone trying to tell you something they think happened, and yet it's loaded with this, you've committed the unforgivable sin according to Lucian. Oh, snap. We got a super duper in the house. There is a consensus in the Wesleyan tradition that understands an expansion in the age of grace against imminent eschatological prophecy, predicated on the 6 times in the Old Testament God repented of his own action. Holy smokes. God's repenting of making mistakes. I should have never done that. I repent. It makes sense in the Wesleyan tradition where they can allow the free will, explanation for things, problems that come up. That's interesting. I did not know that they use that to get away from the failed predictions, to saying, well, God made a mistake. I repent. Okay. I mean, God does repent. God made boo-boos. Okay. God, in some cases, even loses in a fight with the Israelites against another nation because they had iron chariots. Like, how do I put this? God's not the philosophical, omnipotent, omnipresent in some cases, all-knowing, omniscient, right? Some of these guys go so far as say, well, he doesn't really know the future. There's so many different people who have different ways to try and deal with this problem. But I did not know that about the Wesleyan tradition. There is a consensus. So that's interesting. Interesting. Thank you so much for the super chat. I'm gonna keep it up while we play this and continue. I just wanted to make the point about the struggle of the Gospels. And Allison has written on this for decades. Let's continue.
Finger of God's sayings. In fact, if you don't mind me doing this as part of the question, let me read from your book, pages 127 to 128, just so people can get a taste of what you say in this one spot relevant to the question. You say, All 4 canonical gospels have Jesus, through miraculous means, feed a large crowd in a deserted locale. One may, with David Friedrich Strauss, deem the story to be wholly mythical. If that is the right view, then what I'm about to suggest is off target. I love how you just say these things in your book, just saying, because it's like, it puts up like, it shows you're not like trying to force people down, like, you must think what I think. But others, however, believe, as did Albert Schweitzer, that a real event has been distorted into a miracle. Still others of more orthodox conviction hold that the episode occurred as recounted, multiplication and all. Given our historical distance and the nature of the sources, I fail to see how anyone can divine what actually occurred. Love that honesty. I nonetheless incline to suppose that whatever happened in the telling at one point in his ministry, Jesus sought, a bit like the sign prophets and Josephus, to replay in some way an event from the life of Moses. The history of interpretation shows us that readers of the Gospels have often recalled Exodus 16 and the miraculous provision of the manna. So I end the question with, does this suggest the new Moses motif is largely a literary layer added by scribes after the fact, distinguishing Jesus from the failed revolutionary prophets? And you could add in there, why was he successful and none of them were?
So I don't know why the others were not successful. The problem is that all we have is Josephus, and he's a very biased witness. He doesn't like these people. But one possibility, which occurs to me because I doubt that Jesus was a political revolutionary, is that this was not for him a military event. That is, I don't think he saw himself as a warrior messiah who was going to lead the troops against the Romans. I think he has a more
I did not see you, bro. You know you get front row seats when you super chat. Come on, man. Let me pop up here real quick and just point this out. Solera Knight, we were talking about the 12 disciples, right? And you got the 12 tribes. Anyone who does a little study on myth vision, you know, the idea of 12, Niels Peter Lemke, Gamirkin, other scholars who are in the minimalist camp point this out, that Herodotus is like the earliest author who talks about 12, and that there are 12 judges in Egypt. I think they're judges, and they rotate in Egypt. It's like the earliest historical account we have of the 12 is Herodotus, 5th century BCE. And they believe this whole idea of the 12 has roots in Greek idea. Either way, putting that to the side, you say, and thank you for the super chat, archaeologists have discovered 12 zodiac signs in the mosaic floors of numerous ancient Galilean synagogues. I've been there. I didn't see your super chat. I was just commenting to you while we were watching this. I've been there. They're actually really, really cool. Yeah, even in the center, Helios, in some of them, the god Helios is in the center of these Jewish synagogues. Now, did they syncretize Helios with Yahweh and Zeus and Apollo? And probably. I mean, they were probably very syncretic. You know, one more little thing. We came as a group. I was on a tour and I was there with James Tabor. Someone, and I can't remember who, dropped their phone, because when you go into these ancient synagogues, they have raised platforms that keep you off of their floor. I mean, the 2,000-year-old floor. So you're not supposed to step on it, right? They don't want to damage it. So they have these raised platforms. Someone was taking pictures and their phone fell. So the people who were supposed to watch the place, I guess, weren't there. So like, I jumped over the edge to go down. I'm standing on this ancient floor myself, and I'm looking and I see the tiles and like really, really detailed. They put some work into this stuff, and of course grabbed the phone, but I'm like, man, I filmed it. I have it all on a hard drive, all of our footage that we got from the Dead Sea, on the lake of the Sea of Galilee, the Lake of Galilee. I mean, we covered so many spots. It was so cool. But yeah, like, what's up with the 12 on the floor, right? This doesn't debunk that there are 12 disciples. We have to be more cautious with that. But when the text is ridden with all of this legend and fiction, anyone who's being fair, I think, that doesn't already drink the Kool-Aid would step to it and go, oh, hold on. Hold on. All right. I really, really need to be careful. What is real? What isn't? And how can you discern that for sure? How can you be confident? And some of the arguments I've heard, for example, when I asked Bart Ehrman, I've done an interview with Bart, I asked him, you know, what are some of the things you think really go back to Jesus? And Bart Ehrman says, well, I think that the saying in Matthew, I think it's in Matthew, maybe it's Luke, but I think it's Matthew, where he says that you 12 will have 12 thrones seated to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. Talk about the 12 disciples. He's speaking to the 12, But he thinks this goes back to Jesus. And I said, why? He says, because when he says that, Judas hadn't betrayed him yet. And so think of the logic. His point is, why would Jesus tell the 12 if Judas is one of the 12 who's going to get knocked out of being one of the 12 sitting on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes? One of them is going to betray him. He's not going to be sitting on one of those thrones. So he logically thinks this somehow goes back. I'm not convinced that that's persuasive to me, even though I get why he does it. I'm much more thinking the 12 is a generic thing, or the author had fatigue and just wrote the 12. Like, I don't know why we would take that so seriously as historical. I'm much more cautious. Sorry for the ramble, but I hope that makes sense. So, Solera, your point, though, about the zodiac and its prevalence in Jewish circles, in the synagogues, that if Jesus existed, he walked in there and likely bumped into these synagogues that had these zodiac symbols on the floor. You know what I mean? So, yeah, anyway, it doesn't really prove or disprove, but it's interesting to think, what are we reading? Is this stuff bona fide? Is there real history here, or is it literary? My red flags go up, and I'm very cautious.
I'm not sure what the right word is, but God's going to do everything. It's not going to be the war scroll from Qumran. We're not going to divide into troops and I'll be the general. So that when that happens, whatever's going on, it doesn't look like a threat. But I was cautious there. I said, inclined to suppose. I don't know whether that's, I don't know where that is on the probability scale. But I suppose that has to do with my general view of what the synoptics are. And some people here think I'm way too skeptical, like Richard Bauckham thinks I'm way too skeptical. Others think I'm way too conservative. But I tend to think that behind most of these events is some sort of memory. Okay, that's my conviction at the end of all these years. Maybe wrong, but that's my conviction.
And that's why I love Dell, though. As much as I disagree and I'm much more skeptical, and I think, he has his reasons, he's like, I think there's something behind it. He says, but maybe I'm wrong. I like a humble man who could just say, maybe I'm wrong. But this is my conviction after all these years, okay? He doesn't say he knows it. He's just like, this is what I think. And guess what? I'm not following that conclusion. I'm much more cautious about it. But if the evidence shows up or something else makes me persuaded, I'll start going down that path. But that's why I do like him. Is he's not like trying to sell you something like an apologist does. Like, you better believe. He's just telling you what he's thinking, and he could be wrong, and take it or don't.
The way you evaluate these stories isn't just going to be what you think about this one, applying certain criteria. The way you judge any story will depend in part on your sense of the whole, right? And if you think most of this is just fiction, that's going to affect how you think things. So I think there are legends in the synoptics, and I think everything is told from a post-Easter perspective. Nonetheless, I tend to think that not all, most of these events, I don't know what I'm talking about here, 60%, 70%, I've never thought about it.
Yeah.
Come out of some sort of memory. Memory can be imperfect, it can be exaggerated, it can be rewritten. So I'm leaving that open. But if I had to bet, I think that's more likely than Strauss's view, which is simply that someone did everything from scratch, right? Somebody with Moses and Elisha in mind did it all from scratch. I'm more inclined to think that it's like the baptism, where you have an event and then you write it up with your theology, or you write it up in literary, for literary purposes, something like that. But you can't. I don't know how to make an argument for this. All I'm saying is I'm 70 years old, and I've been doing this for 50 years. Rightly or wrongly, I have a sense of things. I might be wrong, but this is my sense. And in this case, I think my sense is supported by Josephus saying that there are these people out there. Also, the gospel writers, they say, don't follow these people out into the wilderness. Matthew and Mark know about these people, and they know that there's some sort of parallel between them and Jesus, because they're saying, hey, don't go follow them.
Hold on, Dell. Hold on, Dell. Okay? This is interesting, because most scholars that I know don't think Mark and Matthew know Josephus. I don't know, man. I'm open to Matthew and Mark knowing Josephus. They do think, most of the critical scholars I bump into are like, yeah, Steve Mason has nailed the coffin shut. Luke Acts is using Josephus. But Mark and Matthew know about this tradition or idea of them following people, false prophets, into the wilderness that Josephus talks about. Why aren't we opening the door and thinking maybe Mark and Matthew know Josephus here? I think that maybe we need to stretch the date of Mark and Matthew a little later, maybe, just maybe, because Antiquities was written and it documents these events. Well, no, most of the scholars see, well, independently, somehow this tradition, they have no way of being certain that Mark and Matthew are dated to 75 and 80 and 85. They have no way to be certain of that. Josephus published his work, Antiquities, in 93. Why couldn't Mark or Matthew be aware of this? I'm just saying, why not? That's all I'm saying. I'm much more cautious about this. But either way, he's making his case. I just had to vent. Here we go.
Right? So, if, as Josephus says, these people are typological prophets, then yeah, why not?
Yeah, two things come to mind in that before we get to our last question, which I think it's your third chapter, is it's interesting because maybe there's just so many other factors that lead into why this movement was successful over against the others. And then we find the famous speech in Gamaliel's mouth, which gets used that way, of course. So there's probably other aspects that allowed this, and who knows what all factors into that. I also appreciate that you're putting your 50 years on the line, just saying, this is where I'm at. And it's a mess, ultimately, even in your view, that says, I think there's memories here. Don't try to put me in a court of law and say that happened. Nope, that didn't happen. As if I know, but that someone probably has some idea about things Jesus did, a concept of events that occurred in his actual life, reenactments of Moses, maybe as a better lawgiver. So many different themes that you would say you think probably do come from the actual historical Jesus, but whoever crafted these narratives did it in such a manner where theology, and you might use theology synonymous with fiction, are writing well-crafted stories. And this reminds me of Lucian's critique of historians. He says in How to Write History, his complaint is that historians, and I don't even necessarily think the gospel authors are trying to write what maybe he has in mind here as histories, but he says historians who are trying to write what happened, if they blur it with legend, fable, things like that, they commit an unforgivable sin because later generations will not actually know what happened. So it creates a distance between the reader and what actually they're trying to say happened, or if something did happen. They're never going to be able to ascertain that. And it seems like this is the kind of pickle we're in, no matter what. The brightest minds on the planet who are looking at this material, you and the collection of academics, will look at one example, one pericope, and not even necessarily be able to agree on what that material, because we just don't know. We can't ultimately get to concrete, if that makes sense.
So that's one of the reasons my method has changed over the years, and I no longer, for the most part, attempt to authenticate a passage or an event or a saying. As I do consistently in this book, I look at the early traditions, taking a sort of cross-section, and say, I see certain themes or motifs that keep occurring, and they're there at the beginning, and they may be enlarged, but they're there at the beginning, and they're very well attested. And once I spot such things, then I can ask, do we have reasons for thinking that this theme or motif or pattern has memory behind it? I don't know anymore how to do much more than that. I'm not a total skeptic about every event and every saying, but most of them, I haven't been persuaded by the arguments on either side. So I woke up a couple of decades ago and thought, maybe there's another way of doing things. But you're right, it's very difficult. Again, that's why we should have a lot of humility here. And it's like anything else important in life. It's difficult, right?
Yes, sir.
It's just difficult. And the sources here are not fantastic. They're just not. We have Paul, and then we have Mark and the other Gospels, and they are not journals from people who were there, and they're not interviews with people who were there. It's just really difficult. I constantly tell people that I can't figure out, I read a lot of books, exactly what happened when John F. Kennedy was shot. I'm not sure what happened. Well, we have this on tape. We had people broadcasting it the day it happened.
Yeah.
We had police and secret service people all over the place. We had a great commission, whatever it was called, an official investigative committee looking at the Warren Commission. We have all these books with all these. I don't know what happened. I'm not sure. And usually what happens to me, if I read a book on the Kennedy assassination that takes a particular stance, I'll read this book and I'll say, well, that could be. But then I'll read another one. And that one could be. And I'll read another one. Well, maybe it was a lone gunman.
Yeah.
So when you have so much data about something that happened in my lifetime, right? My lifetime, and it still can be difficult to figure out exactly what happened. I think we need to be modest. So I'm not doing much more these days than looking for patterns and the common themes and motifs and trying to pin down their origin. That's the best I can do.
Look. I love that. I'm coming back to me, okay? Because listen, if you're a member of Myth Vision, you can go and watch the rest of this and several other videos before anyone else. I don't know why, but YouTube ended up I had a goal set for super chats during this live stream, and then for some reason it
stopped working and I had to reset it. I was going to recognize everyone and say thank you so much for everybody supporting, becoming members and super chats and all that along the way. I plan on doing this tomorrow night, same time, 5 p.m. And I'm just going to run for 2, 3, 4 hours, however long it takes. We've got topics we've got to cover. We're going to stream. We're going to talk. We're going to go deep into all sorts of sources and have a blast. Before I leave, if anyone has a comment, a question or whatever, super chat your question, super chat your comment. Feel free to do so now. I want to end up sniping another platform. Okay. Someone who motivated me recently, they were in the chat earlier, Mega Bloodbath Debates, I think it's called, Taco's channel. I want to snipe his channel, like all of us together. So if you have anything for me that you really want to get out, say it now. So help you God. This is it. I didn't hit my goal on jibber jabber, holy hamaragara shima babara. I was going to do some wild ass super chat, speaking in tongues for the super chats and do something crazy. Y'all could clip me because I'd look like a lunatic, but, we didn't hit the goal. So maybe we'll hit the goal tomorrow and you guys can see some crazy stuff. Oh man. Yeah. I really love you guys. Seriously. Thank you for being here. Solera, thank you. TOS, welcome. Good to see you here. Of course. Ab, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you becoming a member tonight. Both you and Solera became members tonight, or Solera was already a member, I thought. I can't remember. Let me pull up the channel because together we're going to snipe this dude and everyone together is going to say, coming from Myth Vision. Now, whether you stay too long or not, it's your choice. You might like the debate that's happening. You might not. That's okay. That's okay. But let me pull it up real quick here. What Mega Bloodbath Debates. All right. We're all going to go in there together and just watch what happens when they do their thing. When we pop in there. Look, they got 37. Let me show you right now. Let me share you the screen. Okay, here we go. So
have been shot in the head and
there's a debate happening right now.
Lose their entire memory.
I'm muting it so we don't end up getting, in case there's something going on. So here's the deal. We're going to go snipe this channel. Tell him Myth Vision sent you. Here is the link. All right, here is the link right there. I just put it on the screen. Say, yo, from Myth Vision. Myth Vision in the house. Let them know Myth Vision sent you. Let's all let's all pop in here. All right, hit the like button too, friends. We want them to know that we're here. Come on. Come over here and comment. If you could do it, do it. Come on. Is there anybody in here? Anybody at all in here? Oh snap! I just said where are all my 1/8 inch pekkas? Because recently there was a I don't know, him and Jay Dyer were talking about evolution or something, and like how the penis evolves or something. Oh my gosh! And then there was all sorts of drama that happened there. Okay, I hope that you will all go in there. Oh, the fullbackers. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. So yeah, because it's like they don't even. There you go. All right, where are they at on view? Let's see. There's 49 people watching right now. 49 people. Show them some love, man. Let me tell you, this guy yesterday just motivated me and said, Derek, you need to do live streams.
You need to do some more live streams and hang out with your fam. You know what I mean? And he was right. And here I am tonight. I hung out with you guys for 3 hours and 30 minutes. I don't usually do live streams this long, but I'm going to start hanging out with you more and start talking about this stuff and covering a lot more material. All right, let's go show them some love. There's 48 people watching. You on crack too? These people. So the only reason I imagine someone would be mad by my comment is they're Jim Bob fans or something. You know what I mean? Let's ready to get dumber. Look, Ab is hilarious. Ab is hilarious. I help people to leave cults just by focusing on their mind over materialism. Oh, anyway, I hope everybody goes and shows some love over here to Taco. Taco's been trying to grow this thing. Mega Bloodbath Debates. Go subscribe to him. We just sniped him. We just sniped him good. So yeah, make sure you subscribe to him while you're here. Yeah, there's one more person I'd like to snipe if you're still watching me, and that is Deconstruction Zone. We're gonna go hit Justin over the head and tell him, Doug. He has this hypothetical god he calls Doug. Say Myth Vision. Come over here. Let me get this actually. Let me send this to you. We're going to snipe Justin from Deconstruction Zone. Hold on, Regenesis. I'm going to get your super chat in just a second here. This is the other stream. This is Justin, Deconstruction Zone, Myth Vision in the house. Let them know you came from Myth Vision. It shows love and support to other communities. And I really, really hope some people in here will let Justin know, you know, what's up. So this is how you do it. You know what I mean? You want to spread the love, let everybody know. And because I'm about to get off of this live stream here. And hold on. Did Justin just acknowledge me? Hold on. Let me see what's
short form content with mixed in debates.
Let's see.
Okay.
I think he did.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, man. Yeah, those are the only two credits I had.
Can you hear that? Or is that just
Thank
Dr.
you so much for
in my head?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr.
Go
Blitz
ahead,
goes live quite a bit, but most of his following came from his short form content.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm gonna
Gotcha.
speed
Yeah,
it
I see
up.
he goes live like almost every day.
Yep.
Okay.
But
All right, man. Yeah. Yeah.
Share it
thanks a
out.
lot.
When you go live, share it out with our Discord so everyone knows.
Oh yeah, we'll do. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
We support each other
Anybody in
community. If you're
here,
gonna go live, let us know.
let
We'll
them
get
know.
comments.
Myth Vision's in the house.
We'll do. Thanks, man. I really, really appreciate it. Love the stream.
Cheers, buddy.
All right. Cheers.
A W for the name too. Let's get Dre in here. Dre, I tried to get Dre a minute ago, and Dre dropped. Hopefully, Dre's with us this time. Welcome back, Dre. Dre?
He's chilling with his kitty.
I don't think Dre's actually with us. I have no idea what's happening with Dre, but Dre is not with us. All right. Alexander Saboza, thank you so much for the $50. No idea at all how people work.
All right, guys, subscribe. Let me get Regenesis here real quick. Regenesis Codex says, I tried super chatting earlier, but I think plugging my website with free PDFs of my work messed it up. Probably did. YouTube's weird. Listen, I've been watching. People are trying to comment about the whole Epstein thing, and you can't even comment about Epstein without, like, YouTube. I hope people know, like, I don't sit here. I very rarely have to remove someone from my comment section. You have to really be a complete turd to get, like, you know, removed or banned or something in one of my live streams. Unless a person who's a mod who does it and I don't know about it, you got to be a turd. But YouTube has its own filtering system and it prevents things and it has its own mind. I can't control it. But I will say this. If you email me your PDF website, email me mythvisionpodcast@gmail.com or Derek@mythvisionpodcast.com, then I will be happy to plug it and mention it. But let me take a look at it first. I got to first see what you're selling here. Cause if it's a bunch of, like, stuff that I'm, like, not interested in promoting, I'm just being honest, you know, I got to be careful what people do. Cause there's people who will super chat me who are saying, hey, come join my cult, you know, and I'm not saying that you are. I'm just saying I am going to be careful about what I'm promoting here. And anyway, Look, DC Live and you watching him on stream trip me up. Yeah, look, I love Justin. I called him. I didn't know he was doing a stream. I should know better. This guy like lives doing live streams, and he outstreams me, right, in terms of the length that he goes, and he does debates. Maybe I'll eventually do those too. But I will say this. I called him and said, dude, let's cook on Jesus apocalypticism. Let's cook on, preterism. Let's talk about the failed prophecies. And he was like, dude, that's one of my favorite topics, but I'm about to go live. And I'm like, man, I wish I would have, I wish we caught it at the right time, but we got it scheduled at March the 5th, ladies and gentlemen. Me and Justin are going to cook. And when I say cook, I want to go hard on it. I mean, put your feelings aside when you watch what we're going to do, okay? Put your feelings aside because we're going to go in hard on this whole thing. Yeah, please email me. Can I call you later? Tonight it'll be too late, I think. Text me. Let's see. If not tonight, tomorrow maybe better, average Joe. But yeah, definitely get up with me. Get up with me. You're subscribed to Taco. Thanks for subscribing to Taco. Thanks for subscribing to Justin. I hope that everybody, show your content creators support and love. Without you, we don't have shit. Without you, you won't have us here to educate, to teach, to talk, and bringing academia to the public. That's been my forte for a minute. I would say, if I'm going to brag a little, I was one of the pioneers in doing that mainstream, like really pumping out scholarly interviews to the biggest audiences as possible. And one of the first guys to do it, not the only one. There's some really great people on the block doing it now. But I hope you will back those people who bring it to you and try to educate the world. So get behind it. I love y'all. Again, thank you for that super chat, Regenesis. No super duper super speaking in tongues tonight. We didn't hit the goal, but maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow. I'll see you around 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Put it on the calendar. Get ready. We're going to start cooking. Love y'all. Have a good night. And never forget, we are Myth Vision.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland. And I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth. Nothing more.